Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Naruto Became the Chain Wielder of Konoha? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. The second test of the Chunin exams had just begun, marking the start of adulthood for a shinobi. The genin teams hurried into the forest of death, and soon, screams echoed through the trees, putting Team 7 on high alert. A boy with pink hair, Sakura Haruno, the strategist of Team 7, felt a wave of fear wash over him as he asked if those screams were from people. He was only 150.1 centimeters tall and was starting to feel nervous. Naruto Uzumaki, the team's energetic member and often seen as the underdog, urged Sakura not to worry too much. They had come this far, and he wouldn't let his teammate back down now. Sakura swallowed hard, his gaze darting around anxiously. He could feel adrenaline coursing through his veins, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew this was part of the exam, but a shiver of fear ran down his spine. He hesitated, his voice barely a whisper as he questioned whether they should continue. Naruto, determined, thought that if it came down to it, he would carry Sakura on his shoulder to keep moving forward. Sakura felt a chill at the thought of Naruto's fierce determination. Naruto's unwavering resolve was evident, and Sakura shivered under his intense gaze. Despite his apparent lack of skills, Naruto was as stubborn as they came. Moments later, Naruto nonchalantly mentioned he needed to relieve himself and wandered off, leaving his teammates behind. After a few minutes, he returned, looking relieved and rubbing the back of his neck. Sakura scolded him for his lack of decorum, especially in front of Kazumi, the black-haired member of their team. Kazumi shook her head at Naruto's behavior, wondering if he would ever learn some manners. Sakura, still annoyed, crossed his arms and frowned, expressing his frustration at Naruto's antics. Naruto shrugged it off, his trademark grin still on his face. He apologized as he approached Kazumi, who was glaring at him. However, the person in front of them was not the real Naruto. Kazumi quickly moved toward the imposter and kicked him, sending him crashing into a tree. Sakura watched in shock, worried about the impact. The imposter, wiping blood from his mouth, angrily demanded to know what had gotten into Kazumi. Kazumi, ready for a fight, drew a kunai, demanding to know where the real Naruto was. The imposter, still recovering, acknowledged that his disguise had been discovered, and Kazumi prepared to defend herself. Sakura, still trying to process the situation, asked Kazumi why she had attacked Naruto. The imposter laughed darkly, revealing himself to be a ninja from another village using transformation techniques to deceive them. After a brief confrontation where Kazumi emerged victorious, they found Naruto obliviously inspecting an anthill. He asked if they had dealt with the imposter, and Kazumi, frustrated, scolded him for getting captured in the first place. Naruto rubbed his head, wincing from Kazumi's earlier blow but understanding her frustration. He had been tied up by the enemy ninja but managed to escape. Team 7 sat on the ground, discussing the recent events. They formed a circle, visibly agitated after their encounter. Kazumi, still angry, glared at Naruto, expressing her disbelief that he had put them in danger. Sakura agreed, questioning what Naruto had been thinking. Naruto scratched his neck, looking sheepish but still optimistic. He pointed out that they had managed to uncover the imposter thanks to Kazumi's skills. Kazumi's Sharingan glinted dangerously, reminding him that the situation could have ended much worse. Sakura sighed, rubbing his temples, acknowledging Kazumi's point. He urged Naruto to take the situation more seriously. Naruto, wanting a moment of solitude, stayed quiet to avoid further conflict. Kazumi reminded them that if they were separated, they couldn't trust anyone, not even each other. She glanced at Naruto, who was still distracted by the ants, while Sakura hung on her every word. She wondered how she ended up on a team with the class clown and the most annoying member. She warned that they could face a similar situation again, and Sakura agreed. Naruto, hearing this, simply nodded in acknowledgement. Kazumi was right. Blind trust could lead to betrayal and disaster, as the encounter with the imposter had shown. Yet, Naruto seemed unfazed, still focused on the ants. Sakura, exasperated by Naruto's lack of attention, urged him to listen. Finally, Naruto turned to his teammates with a cheeky smile, confirming he understood the importance of not trusting anyone, even their own team. They pondered what actions they could take next. Saku asked Kazumi, who had taken on the leadership of the team for some time, while momentarily setting aside thoughts of Naruto. Kazumi suggested that they should come up with a password just in case. Her teammates seemed to lack the creativity to propose anything, so she continued, explaining that if they were given the wrong password, they would know it was an imposter. She emphasized that this meant an enemy, wanting to make it clear, especially to a certain individual she preferred not to name, who likely hadn't grasped the purpose of the password. Naruto raised an eyebrow at Kazumi, aware of what she was thinking. Kazumi made it clear that she would only say this once. The password would be the poem, Ninja Soul Bleeding. She began to recite the poem but paused. Then she stated the response they needed to give, which was a line from the poem. Saku quickly memorized it, but Naruto complained that it was too long. He expressed his disbelief, questioning if that would really be the password. Kazumi stood up, brushing off her clothes, and announced that she would keep the scroll, ignoring Naruto's question. He grumbled at being disregarded, knowing he would remember the key verse eventually, even if he disliked poetry for reasons he couldn't quite pinpoint. Seeing she wouldn't respond, he stood up alongside Saku and began to follow his teammate, the perfect kunoichi who would likely advance to Chunin rank. Kakashi-sensei had trained her for much longer than he had. In the Forest of Death, during the second phase of the Chunin exams, after Naruto's unsuccessful attempt to suggest a shorter, easier password, they were suddenly hit by a powerful gust of wind that separated Team 7 in different directions. Kazumi managed to grab hold of a thick branch and hide, realizing that the strong wind was not natural but likely an enemy attack. She concealed herself among the branches to see who had launched the surprise attack but was caught off guard when Saku nearly stabbed her with a kunai from behind. Saku recited the password flawlessly. Moments later, Naruto appeared, leaves in his hair and a scrape on his cheek. When Saku asked for the password, he recited it word for word. He sighed in relief, but Kazumi sensed something was off. She pulled out a kunai and threw it at him, which he easily dodged. Kazumi acknowledged that he was faster than before, but she doubted that he could memorize and recite the password along with the poem on the first try. The tension in the air was thick as she kept her kunai aimed at Naruto, scrutinizing every movement of the imposter. Saku quickly positioned herself beside Kazumi, ready to attack if necessary. Naruto, or whoever was beneath that appearance, stood still, a mysterious smile on his lips. He remarked that the little Uchiha was more perceptive than he had thought, admitting he was impressed. He noted that she was indeed remarkable, being the sister of Itachi. Suddenly, a cloud of smoke erupted, revealing the kunoichi from Kusagakure. She asked Kazumi how she had known it wasn't Naruto. Kazumi replied that Naruto would take longer to respond and had a terrible memory. Whoever this woman was, she would regret facing Kazumi. Meanwhile, in another part of the Forest of Death, Naruto was disoriented and confused after crashing into a tree that had halted his progress. He rolled over and pushed himself up to search for his teammates. A shadow loomed over him, and he turned his head slightly to see the source. It was a giant snake, the size of a small house in Konoha. Naruto exclaimed in disbelief, realizing why this place was called the Forest of Death. Anyone could end up as dinner with snakes like this around. He attempted to move carefully and quietly, not wanting to engage in an unnecessary fight. Suddenly, the snake lunged at him, trying to swallow him whole. He jumped to evade the attack, thinking he had narrowly escaped becoming the snake's lunch. However, as he turned his head slightly to the left, he was caught off guard by the snake's tail, which wrapped around him tightly. Face to face with the reptile, he lamented that he would become the snake's dinner when he had hoped to die eating ramen. Those were the last words he thought before being swallowed whole. Inside the giant snake, Naruto remained alive, vowing to make the creature pay for its actions. He called upon his signature technique, Shadow Clone Jutsu, and the snake expanded like a balloon before bursting from within. He mockingly addressed the defeated snake, cleaning off the blood and saliva that clung to him. Naruto began leaping from tree to tree in search of his team, adrenaline coursing through him after his brief battle with the serpent. Kazumi Uchiha, the Academy's Rookie of the Year, was also jumping between the branches, trying to escape from the strange kunoichi alongside her teammates Saku Haruno. After several minutes, they believed they had successfully evaded the kunoichi from Kyuzugakure. Kazumi had sustained an injury to her right leg but managed to escape with her life. The two were in a tree, with Kazumi lying back and Saku kneeling in front of her. Concerned, the pink-haired member of the team exclaimed that he was worried about Kazumi. Quickly, Kazumi placed her right hand over Saku's mouth to silence him. She expressed erratically that they needed to move quickly or they would be found. Saku noticed that his teammate was on the verge of hysteria. He had never seen Kazumi like this before. Kazumi trembled slightly, her breath coming in quick gasps. The tension in the air was palpable, and Saku moved closer to her, trying to calm her with his presence. He whispered for her to relax, but Kazumi barely heard him. Her mind was elsewhere, processing the information she had gathered during their escape. She murmured that the person pursuing them was not just a genin, but possibly a jounin, her eyes shining with a mix of disbelief and fear. Suddenly, a snake attacked from above. Saku noticed it, removed Kazumi's hand from his mouth, and warned her. Kazumi dodged the attack, realizing that her nerves had made her unaware of the snake's approach. She engaged in a brief struggle with the reptile, defeating it with shuriken that struck its head, ending the threat of the massive snake. From a distant tree, she saw the ninja from Kusa emerge from the lifeless body of the snake. A primal fear surged within her. They had been found. The Kusa ninja coiled around the tree like a serpent, preparing to strike at Kazumi. However, several shurikens suddenly embedded themselves in the branch where the ninja was coiled, halting its advance. Kazumi turned her head at the same time as Saku and the Kusa ninja, spotting Naruto standing on a nearby branch, observing everything. He cheerfully exclaimed that he had forgotten the password. Saku congratulated him for stopping the Kusa ninja's approach, but Kazumi thought it was a bad time for him to arrive. He should have found them sooner. With Naruto there, escaping would be more difficult. Kazumi sternly told Naruto to stop pretending to be a hero and to help them. He seemed to ignore her words, and she wondered if he had truly hurt her. She warned him seriously that the enemy was not human, but Naruto remained silent. She concluded that he must have sent the snake to attack her. The proud and arrogant Uchiha Kazumi was now reduced to a frightened girl on the edge of hysteria. She never thought she would see her rival in such a state. The confident Uchiha had vanished, leaving behind a scared child. It was clear that this enemy was dangerous to make her feel this way. Naruto knew firsthand how talented and strong Kazumi was. He had lost to her countless times and now saw her trembling. In that moment, he made a decision to do something he rarely did: think. Just thinking made his head hurt. He was more of an action-first type. He considered his shadow clones, realizing that they could help. He could use the substitution jutsu to switch Kazumi and Saku with one of his clones. The nearest clones were about 40 meters away, and he didn't care about the range limit. He had plenty of chakra. He would create more clones and use smoke as a cover for their escape. He shouted the jutsu for multiple shadow clones, and in seconds, dozens of identical copies of Naruto appeared in a massive cloud of smoke that enveloped everyone present. Despite the many clones, the enemy's gaze remained fixed on Kazumi, indicating that she was the target. Now that he understood the kunoichi's motive, he needed to act quickly. The first step was to disperse half of the clones. The smoke left behind would serve to switch the clone with them and take them to safety. The clone would transform into Saku, while Naruto would take Kazumi's place, and another clone would assume the original's identity. The remaining clones would also transform and flee in different directions. The enemy would likely follow Naruto and the clones that resembled Kazumi and Saku. Kazumi mentally cursed Naruto, knowing he had good intentions, but that wouldn't be enough to defeat the Kusa ninja. She heard Naruto's voice through the smoke, commenting that it was too much chakra. When the smoke cleared, they found themselves in a completely different location with Saku and Naruto. Kazumi was confused about how they had ended up somewhere entirely different in just a few seconds. Naruto commented on the amount of chakra he had used, looking up at the sky. Kazumi quickly lunged at him, demanding to know where they were and how they had gotten there. Naruto dodged her. She realized that he was not the original. Saku, ready with a kunai, questioned if he was truly Naruto. Naruto laughed, finding Saku's suspicion amusing. Kazumi intervened, explaining that he was a shadow clone, essentially Naruto in every way except for being the original. Saku lowered her kunai, still wary. Kazumi asked how they had arrived there and what the original Naruto had done to bring them. The clone hesitated before answering. They had reached this location thanks to the original's plan, utilizing the substitution jutsu and a lot of chakra, along with many clones. They were about 150 meters away from the Kusa ninja and the original Naruto. Kazumi exclaimed that it was impossible, as the substitution jutsu had a range limit of 20 meters. It was impossible that they had been replaced from such a distance, Saku pointed out, knowing the range limit of the technique from the books. The clone frowned, correcting him. The first mistake was that the limit was 50 meters, which they knew because they hadn't moved 3 times with the technique, and the second mistake was assuming they were out of danger. The original plan wasn't that complex, but it had worked in the first part. The Uchiha demanded an explanation, wanting to know how Naruto had managed this. The clone revealed to the original Naruto's companions that the plan was divided into 3 phases: distraction, exchange, and decoy. The 2 genin pondered in unison, realizing that Naruto had actually thought up a plan. Kazumi, calm yet on guard, asked how they had arrived there and what the original Naruto had done to bring them. The clone contemplated whether to share the details. They had reached this location thanks to the original's plan, using the substitution technique along with a lot of chakra and clones. They were about 150 meters away from that ninja from the land of grass. The clone reiterated that the plan was divided into 3 phases: distraction, exchange, and decoy. Kazumi realized that the first phase of the plan had been completed and couldn't believe that Naruto had devised a plan in such a short time. She knew, along with everyone else who knew Naruto, that he was more of an action-oriented person than a thinker. The smoke from the clones had been used as a distraction, allowing Naruto to execute the technique without being noticed. The clone confirmed her deduction. Saku then interjected, noting that the original had recently discovered something interesting about them: the shadow clones. Kazumi asked what that was, suspecting it was connected to their current situation. The clone explained that when they dissipated, their memories and experiences transferred to the original. Kazumi and Saku found it hard to believe that was possible. It was simply brilliant. The original had had the same expression of disbelief when he discovered it, but he accepted it. Saku pressed the clone for the relevance of that fact to their current predicament. The clone explained that Naruto must have used the shadow clones to find them quickly, leaving some to scout the area and exchange them with the original. Connecting the dots, Kazumi still couldn't believe that Naruto had come up with a plan so quickly, but being as unpredictable as he was, it must have been normal for his teammates. That explained the second phase, exchange, but she was still puzzled about the last phase, decoy. She quickly turned to the clone of Naruto, asking if he was Naruto himself. The clone replied that he was essentially Naruto but with a different personality, still part of him. Kazumi inquired about the last part of Naruto's plan, and the clone anticipated her interest. The decoy phase involved the original carrying a clone of himself transformed into Kazumi while fleeing. Several clones had transformed into them as well, but most were imperfect copies. Only 2 were perfect and accompanied the original Naruto. Kazumi, slightly flustered at the thought of being carried by the blonde, expressed her disbelief that the ninja would fall for such a trick. Saku, feeling indebted to Naruto for saving her life, insisted they had to go after him. The clone, blocking Kazumi's path, questioned her desire to ruin everything Naruto had accomplished. Kazumi shot him a look that clearly said to step aside or face the consequences. The clone understood her frustration, acknowledging that it bothered her that the class underachiever could defeat a ninja she couldn't. It was infuriating to think that Naruto could succeed where she had failed. The clone clarified that Naruto wasn't trying to defeat the ninja, he was trying to outsmart him and draw him away from them. Kazumi clicked her tongue in annoyance, recognizing the truth in the clone's words. The clone then tossed an object to Saku, who caught it midair, her eyes widening in surprise at what it was. Saku asked how Naruto had obtained the scroll, and Kazumi shared the same curiosity. The clone explained that the previous two clones had gotten it from a team that had been poisoned by an inedible plant. Realizing they were about to be defeated, they decided to leave the scroll behind with him. Before disappearing, the clone urged them to trust him. Kazumi murmured that trusting Naruto was sometimes like trusting a cunning fox, glancing at the spot where the clone had been. Meanwhile, Orochimaru had fallen into a trap. His obsessive desire for Kazumi clouded his judgment. He had been meticulous in the details of his clones' transformations, from their body odor and height to the facial features of his teammates. At one point during the chase, the Sannin managed to corner the false team. The snake Sannin had stretched his neck in an unnatural way and bitten into the neck of Naruto, who was transformed into Kazumi. This last-minute change meant that the real Kazumi must have been a clone. Orochimaru maintained his chakra control to keep the transformation intact, hoping his improvised plan would succeed. The bite from the Sannin was excruciating, like hot needles piercing through the skin. Naruto stifled a cry of pain, trying not to raise Orochimaru's suspicions. He had faced strong opponents before, but none compared to the monster in front of him. Orochimaru remarked that she should feel honored that one of the three Sannin had set his eyes on her. Naruto, still transformed as Kazumi, was confused by the mention of the Sannin. He realized he had likely missed important lessons in the academy while distracted or asleep. Orochimaru introduced himself with a wicked smile, claiming that Kazumi's youthful beauty surpassed that of his previous student, Anko, and that her body would be perfect for him. He reached out, brushing his cold, serpentine fingers against her cheek. But then he declared it was time for him to leave, saying he would see her later. Naruto trembled, his heart racing in fear that his transformation might fail, which would be disastrous not just for him but for his team as well. The pain he felt was reminiscent of a time he had been kicked in a sensitive area. It was sheer willpower and chakra control that kept his transformation intact, preventing him from revealing himself to the treacherous Sannin. Orochimaru whispered that a seal would help Kazumi gain power, and if she wanted more, she could come to him. The thought was repulsive to Naruto. He had heard of seals before and had wanted to research them in the library, but each time he tried, the librarian had found excuses to keep him out. He had given up for the moment, believing he would have time to investigate them later in life. He knew some things about seals, like their use in storage scrolls, but he never imagined they could be used to grant power. Suddenly, a voice called out in horror, demanding to know what had happened to Kazumi. It was a clone of Sakura, disguised as the original. Naruto mentally congratulated himself on the transformation's details, which were subtle yet intricate. His willpower again prevented the clone from dissipating. The clone, furious, shouted at Orochimaru, demanding to know what he had done to Kazumi, who was now on her knees, clutching her neck where she had been bitten. As Orochimaru began to sink into the ground like water, he mockingly replied that it was a small gift he had given her before disappearing completely. Naruto remained transformed as Kazumi for a few more minutes, ensuring the Sannin had truly left. He lacked enough chakra to deceive Orochimaru again and doubted the Sannin would fall for the same trick twice. He concluded that someone like Orochimaru would not be fooled again. Feeling as if a searing hot iron was piercing through his neck, Naruto leaned against a tree, dispelling his transformation and the clones that remained. After regaining his composure, he took deep breaths, trying to recover some energy. He hoped he would never have to see the snake Sannin again. Rubbing his neck, he attempted to soothe the pain from the seal Orochimaru had forcefully placed on him. As the pain in his neck began to subside, Naruto felt a strange warmth emanating from the seal. Suddenly, an intense pain exploded in his head, causing him to stagger and grip the tree tightly to avoid falling. Confused and in pain, he murmured to himself that he needed to move and find his team. Determined, he began to jump from branch to branch in search of his teammates, but the exhaustion and pain overwhelmed him, causing him to crash to the ground with a thud. He groaned in pain as he hit the forest floor and caught a glimpse of a hollow tree out of the corner of his eye. He decided to rest there for the moment. Inside the hollow tree, surrounded by shadows filtering sunlight through the leaves, Naruto found himself in absolute silence, save for the sound of his ragged breathing and the dull thump of his heart. He needed to recover before seeking out his team to finish the second stage of the Chunin exams. Orochimaru had made him feel weak, and he recalled vowing in the past never to feel that way again. Now, he felt as if he had broken that vow, making him feel like the worst person in the world. He murmured that it would only be a moment before he succumbed to unconsciousness, overwhelmed by pain, fatigue, and chakra depletion. Meanwhile, Kazumi and Sakura sat by a campfire, contemplating their next move. Sakura suggested heading directly to the tower to complete the second stage of the exam, confident that Naruto would catch up with them before they arrived. Kazumi stared into the flames, her thoughts drifting in the cool night air. The past few hours had been intense. While she found Sakura's idea appealing, she quickly dismissed it, not wanting to face a lecture from their sensei for abandoning the dobe. It wasn't as if she and Naruto were anything more than teammates. In truth, Kazumi wanted to avoid any involvement with her teammates, whether romantic, social, or even professional. They were a means to an end for her. Becoming a Chunin was her current goal. Besides, she already had a boyfriend, Hinata Hyuga, the heir of the Hyuga clan. Their relationship had not started off well. Their mothers had forced them to be friends, and at first, she could hardly tolerate the arrogance of the Hyuga heir. However, after a small incident, things changed. One thing led to another, and before they graduated from the academy, they became a couple, even though her first kiss was an accident with Naruto. She made up for it with many kisses afterward, and he understood that it had been an accident with the class's underdog. Naruto was just an orphaned boy, without a clan or any notable talent, barely possessing the skills necessary to be a ninja. She knew that Naruto would not become a Chunin anytime soon, or he might remain a genin forever. Kazumi was not interested in the possibility of a relationship with Naruto, despite having shared some close moments in the past. To her, Naruto was simply a teammate, someone she needed to work with to achieve her individual goals. Yet, she had to admit that Naruto had a knack for surprising people and occasionally came up with good ideas, but that wouldn't matter if he didn't put them into practice more often. She glanced at Saku, a boy who was not a member of any clan in Konoha. He was just a civilian who had decided to become a ninja. He had talent but little professionalism. He seemed more focused on looking good than on training seriously. He was intelligent, but what good was intelligence if it wasn't applied on the battlefield or during training to improve his ninja skills? He also asked her out whenever he could, but she ignored him, wondering if he didn't realize she was already taken. They decided to wait until the next day. If Naruto didn't show up by the afternoon, they would head straight to the tower. She felt sorry for Naruto, but those days would serve as a chance for them to rest. The mission was paramount, regardless of the team's well-being, and she was eager to see Hinata. Saku understood perfectly. His teammates' words were not meant to be hurtful, just a harsh truth. The mission always came before the team's welfare. He volunteered to take the first watch, and Kazumi agreed. She went to sleep, planning to wake up for the second watch. Saku remained vigilant during the first part of the night, keeping a silent watch as he listened to the sounds of the forest. When it was time to change shifts, he woke Kazumi to take over. In another part of the forest, Hinata lay back, gazing at the sky and wondering how Kazumi was doing. She hoped her girlfriend had found the missing scroll and reached the tower without being bothered by Naruto or Saku asking her out. Her team had already secured the scroll, and they would head directly to the tower the next morning. Hinata was eager to see Kazumi again, but not so much to face her teammates, especially Naruto. He often wondered how someone like Naruto, who seemed to lack talent, had managed to become a ninja. Life was full of mysteries. He didn't like Naruto for 3 simple reasons. First, he was loud and complained at every opportunity. Second, he lacked the talent to be a ninja. He had willpower, but that wouldn't suffice. And lastly, he had kissed his girlfriend in front of him, unaware that she was his girlfriend. From that moment on, Hinata felt a mix of anger and disdain for Uzumaki, mocking the name internally. Uzumaki was a silly name. Who in their right mind would choose such a name? It held no value. He decided to close his eyes and sleep, as it was time for his watch. His last thoughts before drifting off were that Naruto Uzumaki was nothing compared to him. The Hyuga were the best in Konoha, except for the Uchiha, who could stand beside them. A man confidently spoke to a small boy, no older than 6, with blue eyes. He held a small vial in front of the child, claiming that if he drank it before bed, everyone would love him the next day. Those sweet words motivated the boy, giving him the push he needed to accept the vial from the stranger. Excitedly, he declared he would drink every last drop, envisioning a day filled with friends and play. Naruto awoke to a gentle touch on his forehead, sensing someone nearby. He slowly opened his eyes to see a girl sitting beside him, concern etched on her face. She softly asked if he was okay, touching his cheek gently. He closed his eyes for a moment. Startled, Naruto sat up, disoriented and confused. It took him a few seconds to gather his thoughts. He wondered what that dream had been about, as it was unusual for him to remember dreams so vividly. He realized he needed to leave immediately. Peering through a hole in the tree, he noticed the dawn light breaking. He had slept nearly the entire night. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, he stood up from the cold ground where he had spent the night, feeling fortunate to have survived unscathed. Maybe he was exaggerating, but in an exam where killing was allowed, the possibility was significant. Naruto was feeling rough. He was hungry and thirsty and noticed he had a slight fever, which was unusual for him. He had experienced hunger and thirst before and could move relatively well, but with the fever, he was unsure how his body would react to such high stress. He decided it wasn't the time to dwell on it. He exited the hollow tree and began jumping between the branches in search of his teammates, hoping to find water and food, as his body urgently needed it. He felt a throbbing pain in his neck and stopped on a branch, leaning against the tree. A twisted, malevolent voice began to whisper in his ear. It was the voice of the traitor Sannin. Naruto concluded that it was the work of the cursed seal that allowed Orochimaru to invade his thoughts. The voice offered power and knowledge, urging him to succumb to the control of the cursed mark. Naruto reflected on how this must be Orochimaru's method of luring his victims, offering them power and knowledge in exchange for becoming future test subjects. This seal was meant for Kazumi. He doubted she would have accepted such an unwanted gift. Yet, it always came back to her she was better, and he should learn from her dedication to training. He felt frustration as he realized that he lacked the resources she had, with his sensei too busy teaching Kazumi and Sakura, leaving him at the bottom of the list. Suddenly, he halted his thoughts, questioning where those last feelings had come from. It had to be the cursed seal. It was altering his behavior and influencing his thoughts. He started to hyperventilate, his breathing becoming heavy and irregular. He fell to his knees on the branch, his forehead crashing against the bark as his vision blurred. He lifted his hands, examining them closely, wondering internally what was happening to him. Was this the effect of Orochimaru's seal? Was he truly expressing envy towards his peers and anger at his teacher? The realization that the seal was affecting his behavior terrified him. He was afraid of becoming someone he was not, scared of what might happen to him, fearful of turning into a monster. Finally, he broke down and cried bitterly, his breath becoming ragged. He fainted on the branch, fortunate that it was wide enough to prevent him from falling to the ground and injuring himself. He was going through a difficult time in his life and needed support, needed help. The question remained, who would help Naruto? Who would be there for Naruto Uzumaki during this challenging moment? Perhaps someone close, maybe one of his teammates, or even a stranger. Or perhaps, as always, no one at all. In another part of the Forest of Death, Anko Mitsurushi had an emotionally charged encounter with her sensei, Orochimaru. She faced him after Chunin-ranked ninjas informed her that they had discovered the genin team from the grass dead. It would not have been unusual if it weren't for the fact that the face of the woman in the group had been torn off. In that moment, she realized that Orochimaru had infiltrated the Chunin exams. She recognized his modus operandi. What had happened to that woman bore the trademark of the traitor Sannin of Konoha. Quickly, she ventured deeper into the forest to confront him directly but ended up being overpowered by her former teacher, treated like a genin despite being a jounin. Just recalling that humiliation soured her palate, and she noticed the satisfaction in Orochimaru's smile, knowing he had achieved his goal. He had likely placed a cursed seal on one of the participants in the Chunin exams. Which one could it be? She wondered as she opened the door to the Hokage's office to inform him that the traitor Sannin was in Konoha. Hiruzen sighed at Anko's presence in his office. She rarely came to speak personally. The tone of her voice indicated the importance of her message. She informed him that Orochimaru was in the village and had infiltrated the exams, possibly placing a cursed seal on a genin from Konoha or another village. Hiruzen understood the gravity of the situation. Orochimaru was likely after the Sharingan, obsessed with the Uchiha clan's Jujutsu, willing to do anything to obtain it. He assigned Anko the mission to find Team 7, suspecting that Orochimaru might have targeted the daughter of the Uchiha clan leader. Anko accepted the order, recalling how her former teacher was fixated on the Sharingan. In a flash of leaves, she disappeared. Hiruzen sighed wearily. His rebellious student had returned to Konoha to cause trouble, possibly to destroy it. He called for the Umbu, and masked ninjas appeared, kneeling before the third Hokage. He ordered them to notify the clan leaders that a meeting would be held shortly, as well as the elders. The Umbu vanished in a flash, ready to deliver the third Hokage's message to the clan leaders and elders. Meanwhile, many clan leaders in Konoha were busy with their work in the village, some holding important positions. The political climate was tense, and the competition for power was at its peak. The leaders of each clan fought for their standing within the hierarchy, which included participation in Konoha's military police. Fugaku Uchiha, the leader of the Uchiha clan, was in his office reviewing reports from the military police, including applications for new recruits. 4 years prior, non-clan members had been allowed to join, which had sparked criticism and dissent among the various clans and their leaders. Some of the more paranoid elders in the clan pointed out that allowing outsiders to join Konoha's military police was a mistake. Others, who harbored animosity towards the Uchiha or had poor relations with them, claimed it was merely a ploy to gain access to the clan's secret jutsus. Fugaku dismissed such notions, viewing them as narrow-minded attitudes that limited the village's true potential. To him, it was essential to allow talented individuals to join, regardless of their background, as it would strengthen Konoha as a whole and provide an opportunity for growth as a powerful and prosperous village. Among the reports on his desk, one stood out above the rest. It detailed a girl with long black hair who was playing pranks on civilians in Konoha. While not entirely unusual for the village, he knew he needed to pay attention to any situation that could jeopardize the safety of its inhabitants. At that moment, he recalled Naruto Uzumaki, the infamous prankster of the village, who was currently participating in the Chunin promotion exam. Fugaku read the report on the girl carefully, considering the possibility that she might be a copycat of Naruto, a notion he found almost impossible. While reflecting, an idea began to form in his mind. If this girl was bold and agile enough to cause trouble for the citizens of Konoha, she might possess some value in terms of ninja skills. After all, Naruto had also been known for his mischief before becoming a genin. Despite his daughter Kazumi's belief that Naruto lacked talent as a ninja, he reminded her that everyone has an essential role in the village. He had seen potential in Naruto and had suggested to the third Hokage that he include him in his daughter's team. For now, he needed to focus on addressing the issue with the prankster girl and ensure that no more citizens of Konoha fell victim to her antics. Perhaps if Kazumi knew the truth about Naruto, her opinion of him would change. Although he held no personal grudge against the boy, he recognized that many in Konoha despised the host of the Kyuubi due to the burden he carried. The events from 13 years ago had caused resentment and discrimination against his clan for many years, which he found unjust. It was not their fault that a madman with a Sharingan had controlled the Kyuubi. It was akin to blaming a Hyuga who had lost one of their eyes for its misuse. Through constructive dialogue, negotiations, and political maneuvers, he and the third Hokage had finally managed to restore his clan's place in Konoha's society. He sighed in relief, knowing that this problem had been resolved long ago and that his clan had regained its standing in Konoha, but caution was still necessary. Without warning, an Umbu appeared suddenly in front of his desk, raising an eyebrow at the abrupt entrance. This Umbu was unlike the others. He was one of the higher-ranking bodyguards of the third Hokage. He informed Fugaku Uchiha that he was urgently needed at the Hokage Tower in the meeting room, giving the impression that the meeting likely involved sensitive and strategic matters. Fugaku knew that the third Hokage was meticulous about who was summoned to these meetings. Typically only the clan heads and the Elder Council were called. Emergency meetings were rare and usually indicated an urgent topic or a situation involving the village's safety. He wasted no time trying to guess what issues might be addressed in the meeting. When he inquired about the meeting's topic, the Umbu firmly replied that he could not disclose any information, stating that the Hokage would reveal it in the meeting room. A sense of foreboding arose within Fugaku upon hearing this. Regardless, he knew he needed to be there to support the third Hokage and ensure that any decisions made would be for the well-being of the people of Konoha. He also hoped that whatever the matter was, it would not somehow involve his daughter Kazumi, who was taking the Chunin promotion exam. After the Umbu disappeared in a puff of smoke, Fugaku decided not to waste time. He stood up from his desk, ensuring that his papers were neatly arranged before leaving his office. As he made his way through the bustling precinct, he noticed other clan leaders heading toward the Hokage Tower as well. Emergencies were complicated and unpredictable. The walk was solitary, yet it was the one that made him stronger, he thought. A man with blonde hair reflected on this notion, sharing his thoughts with a friend who looked puzzled by the enigmatic statement. The man explained that sometimes one needed solitude to find their path and grow stronger, just like training alone. Although his friend struggled to grasp the meaning, he knew that with time and experience, understanding would come. Meanwhile, Naruto felt a tremor of fear as unsettling memories flooded his mind, causing his heart to race. Those dreams, more vivid than reality, were beginning to drive him to the edge. He tried to take a deep breath, but it felt as though the air slipped away before he could hold it. Each time he closed his eyes, terrifying images returned, trapping him in an endless nightmare. He repeated to himself that he had a will of steel, a mantra that had helped him through many difficult moments in the past. This simple phrase gave him the strength to face any challenge and hold his head high. It enabled him to endure any physical or emotional pain, any obstacle life threw at him. Without that phrase, he might have given up long ago. With a clearer mind, he stood up and continued forward, feeling anchored in the chaotic and sometimes cruel world around him. Hayashi Hyuga sat sipping tea with his wife and their guest, Uchiha Mikoto. They were discussing various topics, including the upcoming Chunin exams. Hayashi agreed with his wife that their son Hinata had a strong chance of becoming a Chunin. He also believed that Kazumi, Mikoto's daughter and Hinata's best friend, could showcase her skills and achieve the same. Their conversation was interrupted by a member of the branch family who entered the room, accompanied by an Umbu. The Umbu informed them that he was urgently needed at the Hokage Tower for a confidential matter that would be addressed in the meeting room. Before Hayashi could inquire about the details, the Umbu vanished in a cloud of smoke. With that, Hayashi stood up, bidding farewell to his wife and Mikoto Uchiha. The visit from a personal Umbu of the Hokage must have been significant. He left the Uchiha compound heading toward the Hokage Tower, encountering the other clan leaders along the way. It seemed they had all received the same urgent message. Saori Hyuga pondered the seriousness of the situation while serving tea to her friend. Mikoto Uchiha took a sip and sighed, revealing her own concern. Together, they speculated about what could have prompted the Hokage to summon the leaders of the Hidden Leaf Village so suddenly. Mikoto suggested that it might be related to the Chunin exams, knowing how unpredictable those events could be. Saori hoped it was just that, taking a moment to drink her tea. Mikoto noticed her friend's pale face and understood the source of her worry. She tried to reassure Saori, reminding her that their children would be fine. Both mothers were anxious, as their children were participating in the exams. Saori expressed her concern for one child in particular, Naruto Uzumaki, who was on her daughter's team. Mikoto understood the depth of Saori's worry, as Naruto was also the son of their dear friend, Kushina Uzumaki. Mikoto reassured Saori that he would be alright, though she wasn't entirely certain, having only heard about him through her daughter Kazumi. Mikoto had never spoken to Naruto directly, only seen him from a distance. She had hesitated to approach him due to past conflicts between their clans and the village. After those issues were resolved, she wanted to reach out, feeling it was something she owed to Kushina. However, she had lacked the courage to do so. To encourage her daughter to build friendships with her teammates, she had pushed Kazumi, but her daughter had resisted, viewing Naruto as just another lucky kid who happened to be a ninja. If only she knew the truth that Naruto was the son of the legendary fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, perhaps she would appreciate his friendship more and change her attitude toward him. Meanwhile, Hiruzen Sarutobi sat patiently in his chair, aware that his students' return to the village signified danger, not just for himself but for all of Konoha. He sighed, feeling the weight of his age. He knew it was time to consider a successor who could lead the village with wisdom and honor. He contemplated potential candidates, including the young Itachi Uchiha, a prodigy with remarkable talent and dedication. Jiraiya, his closest and most loyal student, also came to mind, as did Tsunade Senju, a powerful kunoichi with advanced medical skills. Lastly, Shikaka Nara, the cunning commander of the Jounin, was another strong contender. Hiruzen understood that choosing a successor would not be an easy decision. His thoughts were interrupted when his former teammate, Danzo Shimura, entered the room. Danzo had always sought power for Konoha, but in ways Hiruzen did not agree with. He sat silently, as was his custom. Their friendship had ended years ago when Danzo proposed the extermination of the Uchiha clan, a suggestion Hiruzen could not accept. After a few minutes, the leaders of the various clans arrived, taking their seats in silence as they awaited the meeting's start. After taking a final puff from his pipe, Hiruzen addressed the room with a serious tone. He stated that he would be direct and straightforward about the reason for their gathering. Curious, Shikaku asked what that reason was. Hiruzen took a deep breath and spoke gravely, revealing that Orochimaru was in the village. The mere mention of the name created a tense atmosphere. While many present could challenge Orochimaru, only a few could face him in direct combat. Inoichi Yamanaka, incredulous, asked if Hiruzen was certain. Now it was clear why the meeting was so urgent. Hiruzen nodded solemnly and explained that Orochimaru had infiltrated the Chunin exams, taking the place of a kunoichi from the Land of Grass, eliminating her team and using her face as a disguise to move undetected. One of the attendees quietly confirmed that Orochimaru was indeed capable of such a gruesome act. Hiruzen added that it was known Orochimaru had achieved his objective, which cast a heavy silence over the room. The cursed seal was a shared concern among them. If Orochimaru had succeeded, it would spell trouble for Konoha. Fugaku inquired about the potential victim, highlighting the gravity of the situation. Hiruzen did not respond immediately. Instead, he gave an empathetic look to the leader of the Uchiha clan before continuing. He informed Fugaku in a low voice that the victim was Kazumi Uchiha, his daughter. Fugaku's breath became heavy as he struggled to contain his emotions in the room. He wanted to rush out and confront Orochimaru for harming his daughter. The clan leaders of Konoha were aware of Orochimaru's obsession with the Sharingan, and it was logical that the traitorous Sannin would focus on someone of interest. It was likely that his target was a less experienced member of the Uchiha clan, which made Kazumi vulnerable. One of the attendees at the meeting respectfully asked how they would proceed. Hiruzen replied firmly that the Chunin exams would continue as scheduled. An elite team would be formed with the sole mission of finding Orochimaru and eliminating him once and for all, as he had caused too many problems. Tsum Inazuka, the leader of the Inazuka clan, inquired about who would be part of the elite team. Hiruzen calmly stated that the information was confidential for now but assured them it would be a team capable of definitively dealing with Orochimaru. He then informed the clan leaders that they could leave if there were no further questions. One by one, they began to exit the room until only Fugaku and Hiruzen remained. Hiruzen, in a friendly tone, asked Fugaku what he wanted to discuss. Fugaku passionately requested to be part of the team going after Orochimaru, locking eyes with the Hokage. Hiruzen took a moment to think, as he had already planned for Shisui Uchiha, Itachi Uchiha, and Yamato, a user of wood release, to be part of that special team. Finally, Hiruzen agreed, stating that Fugaku, along with Itachi, Shisui, and Yamato, would be responsible for pursuing Orochimaru. Fugaku expressed his deep gratitude before leaving the room. As soon as he finished speaking, Fugaku rushed off to find his son, his nephew, and Yamato. There was no time to waste. Orochimaru needed to be hunted down immediately. Hiruzen watched the Uchiha clan leader leave, sighing with concern, knowing that it would not be easy to deal with Orochimaru. As Naruto leaped through the trees, Orochimaru's voice whispered in his ear since he had set out on his path. His willpower and experience with the power of the Kyuubi allowed him to resist the temptation of using the cursed seal. Orochimaru's voice urged him to embrace the power of the seal, claiming that Konoha was his enemy and that the favoritism his teacher showed toward Kazumi was blatant. Naruto recognized that he deserved more due to his ability to control the nine-tailed fox. However, he resisted these temptations and continued jumping from tree to tree, trying to ignore the negative influences trying to lead him astray. Although some of the whispers held a grain of truth, Naruto chose to disregard them. Suddenly, a female scream pierced the air, stirring his compassionate heart. He could not ignore someone in danger. Determined to help, he agilely leaped through the trees toward the source of the cry. He murmured to himself that he hoped it wasn't a trap as he approached the direction of the distress call. He was not in the mood to deal with traps at that moment. If it turned out to be one, he would ensure that those responsible faced the consequences. However, as these thoughts crossed his mind, he halted abruptly, reminding himself that he was not a killer. Another scream jolted him from his thoughts, and he resumed running toward the sound. In Training Ground 44, Naruto continued to leap between the branches, following the desperate cries coming from the depths of the Forest of Death. Any loyal ninja would have known to stay away and not get involved, wasting precious time during the exam. But Naruto Uzumaki was not just any ninja. He was an unpredictable ninja from Konoha who would one day become Hokage and be recognized by everyone as one of the people. The phrase, "one of the people," tightened in his throat for some reason. Being acknowledged as a part of Konoha was his dream, to be seen as Naruto Uzumaki, not merely as the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, the creature that had destroyed Konoha 13 years ago on the day of his birth. Karen Uzumaki screamed in desperation as she fled across the grass and roots of the Forest of Death. Clutching a fake scroll in her hands, she had no idea how to escape. She called out for her teammates, Shirogiri and Katsu, but received no response. She knew she was completely alone and needed to find a way out by herself. Despite her situation, she couldn't stop pleading for help from anyone nearby. She was being chased by a giant brown bear. Her teammates had provoked the animal on purpose, and now she was paying the price. Karen ran as fast as she could, desperately trying to escape the dangerous creature. Her clothes were torn, and her exposed skin bled in several places from the sharp branches and thorns littering the path. The only response she received was the unyielding silence of the trees. The bear's growls grew louder as it closed in on her, drowning out any other sound. Karen realized that Shirogiri and Katsu were using her as bait to obtain the scroll that would help them advance to the next round. They hoped someone would notice her, a young redhead with glasses, and come to her rescue from the bear, only for her teammates to swoop in and steal her scroll, rewarding her heroism with betrayal. Her heart raced in her chest as she ran, her lungs burning from exertion. The bear's heavy footsteps thundered behind her, closing in quickly. Karen knew she couldn't keep fleeing for much longer. She had warned them that it was a foolish plan. She couldn't believe her teammates were willing to put her life at risk. They had been warned in advance about the dangers of the Death Forest, where people often lost their lives. Karen knew that no one would come to rescue her, and she was tired of running endlessly. Yet she pressed on, searching for any chance to escape the bear and find a safe place. The odds were slim, but Karen was not one to give up easily. With one last effort, she dove into a dense thicket, hoping it would conceal her from the bear's sight for a moment. As she crawled through the leaves, she heard heavy footsteps approaching. The animal had lost her trail, but it wouldn't take long for it to find her again. Karen needed to think of something quickly if she wanted to survive. The Death Forest was a terrible place. It seemed even more dangerous than the Great Kusa Forest, where mushrooms could grow as large as buildings due to the rich soil and the canopy of trees blocking sunlight. While the Great Kusa Forest had its share of venomous snakes and lizards, at least it didn't have tigers, giant centipedes, or leeches trying to drain her dry. But here in the Death Forest, Karen was being pursued by a giant bear that roared and growled behind her. She was exhausted, drenched in sweat, and terrified for her life. Karen was on the brink of collapse. Her chakra reserves were nearly depleted, and her body trembled from fatigue. Karen curled up deep within the bushes, holding her breath as she listened to her predators searching the nearby vegetation. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, threatening to betray her position. She squeezed her eyes shut tightly, as if that could make her invisible. The young redhead knew she could die there, and the worst part was that she suspected her teammates would abandon her to her fate. Karen thought about how this might be the end as she let out a long sigh. She resigned herself to the idea that her time was near. With tears in her eyes, she emerged from the bushes to face the enormous bear that had been chasing her. Though her strength was waning, she would not die without a fight. Looking directly into the bear's eyes, she shouted with all the strength she had left, urging the creature to finish her off. Even as she felt her life slipping away, Karen wanted it to be quick and painless. She stared at the bear unwaveringly, awaiting the final blow that would end her existence. The bear lunged at her, and Karen closed her eyes, bracing for the intense pain of its jaws. But the pain never came, and she slowly opened her eyes, cautious. She heard muffled growls, and when she finally dared to look, she was met with an unimaginable sight. Instead of the enormous, furious animal before her, there was a boy her age on top of the bear, tightening what appeared to be a ninja wire around its neck. Karen was completely stunned as she watched the stranger tighten his grip, not allowing the animal to breathe. He seemed entirely focused on his task, oblivious to everything else around him. Karen wondered what on earth was happening as she listened to the bear's muffled growls in its struggle for freedom. Then the stranger looked at her and exclaimed with enthusiasm that she would make a perfect jacket. Karen shuddered at the boy's words but couldn't tear her gaze away from the unfolding scene. The bear seemed to be losing the fight gradually, and Karen was uncertain about what she should do. As she continued to watch, fascinated, the stranger tightened the ninja wire around the bear's neck until the animal finally ceased to move. With one last pull, he finished subduing the bear. Karen looked on in horror and fascination as the creature fell heavily to the ground, motionless. The boy stood triumphantly, wiping the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. He declared that he had done it and would now have the best fur jacket he had ever owned. Naruto was exhausted, barely having any chakra left to confront the bear. He had to rely on his physical strength and agility to evade the giant animal's attacks. Upon arriving at the scene of danger, he found a girl with red hair cornered by the bear, defiantly shouting at the predator. Naruto admired the young woman's bravery as she fought for her survival. The redhead closed her eyes, awaiting her imminent end, but he could not allow that to happen. He watched as the bear charged directly at her with the intent to attack. Drawing on a portion of the chakra he had regained, Naruto acted swiftly. He leaped onto the bear's back, reached for its neck, and pulled out a ninja wire from his pocket, wrapping it around the bear's neck and beginning to apply pressure. He shouted for the bear to be quiet and just give up. The bear struggled, but Naruto held firm, determined to end the threat before it could harm the redhead. Angered by the bear's persistence, Naruto tightened his grip on the ninja wire, feeling the animal's erratic movements. However, something shifted within him. He began to understand the bear's instincts and felt empathy for it. He apologized to the bear, loosening his grip slightly. The animal's will to live mirrored his own, prompting him to reflect on the situation. But despite his empathy, he knew that only one of them could survive. Making a quick decision, he tightened the ninja wire around the bear's neck, bringing the struggle to an end. He whispered that only one of them could live as he pressed firmly on the wire to finish the fight. The bear's lifeless body crashed to the ground with a heavy thud, causing the entire area to tremble. Naruto remained clinging to the bear's back, keeping his grip on the ninja wire to ensure the animal was truly gone. He exclaimed that he had done it and would now have the best fur jacket he had ever owned. He planned to make good use of the bear's meat and hide, determined not to let its death be in vain. He then asked the red-haired girl if she was okay, standing on the bear's back. It was clear that she could hardly believe what she had just witnessed. Naruto understood her disbelief. If he were in her position, he wouldn't believe it either. He asked her again if she was all right. Naruto, breathing heavily from the back of the bear, looked at the red-haired girl who had approached to see what had happened. She was astonished by what she had just witnessed, and Naruto understood her feelings perfectly. He was still surprised that he had managed to defeat the enormous creature with so little chakra. Curiosity filled her eyes as she asked how he had done it. Naruto, with a tired smile, replied that it was a matter of holding on tight while he tried to catch his breath after such a struggle. However, he soon noticed that her expression shifted to one of concern. She realized that Naruto had risked his life to help her, and feeling indebted, she decided to warn him about the trap. Karen knew she owed him that much. Just as she began to speak, a male voice from one of her teammates interrupted her, praising her for finally proving her worth to the team. Naruto sighed in resignation. His kindness had led him into a trap. If only he had listened to his instincts and left that desperate person to their fate, he wouldn't be in this predicament. He quietly wondered how Saku and Kazumi were faring while trying to avoid being overheard by the two new enemies that had appeared before him. Meanwhile, Saku and Kazumi were being watched from a distance by sound ninjas sent by Orochimaru. Their goal was to provoke Kazumi into using the power of her cursed seal. Although the sound ninjas were unaware of the seal on Kazumi's neck, they believed they had been sent to eliminate the young Uchiha. As they waited for the right moment to strike, Team 7 was engaged in a conversation. Kazumi expressed her concern that if Naruto didn't show up in 2 hours, they would have to go look for him. She wasn't particularly enthusiastic about this, as she didn't want to feel indebted to the blonde Uzumaki. They had already been waiting all morning, and midday was approaching. They wanted to reach the tower where the third part of the Chunin exam would take place. If their sensei found out they had abandoned Naruto, he would surely deny them training for several days, followed by a lecture. Kazumi needed to become stronger to match her brother Itachi, with the main goal of surpassing him. That was why she decided to seek out Naruto, as she didn't want her training with Kakashi-sensei to be interrupted by the blonde's actions. Additionally, if her mother found out she had left Naruto behind, she would undoubtedly scold her and be disappointed. Kazumi recalled how her mother had told her to get along with her teammates. When she had asked why, her mother simply replied that it was important to get along with them. However, Kazumi hadn't made much effort to bond with the other team members. She merely tolerated them because she knew it was necessary for her ninja career. In contrast, Naruto always acted without considering the consequences for others. Team 10, consisting of Shikamaru Nara, Ino Yamanaka, and Choji Akimichi, hid behind some bushes to avoid being discovered by the Sand Village team. They had witnessed Gaara, the red-haired member of that team, eliminate another team in a brutal and inhumane manner. The experience was shocking and made it clear that they should not underestimate their enemy. With a smile on his face, Gaara seemed to take pleasure in the brutal way he had dispatched the waterfall ninjas. His demeanor made him appear like a true demon in the eyes of everyone. He showed no mercy as he finished them off, demonstrating the overwhelming strength he possessed. As they tried to remain unnoticed, Team 8, composed of Shinso Aburame, Hinata Hyuga, and Kiba Inuzuka, successfully obtained the scroll they needed and were now heading toward the tower. What they didn't know was that they would soon encounter Team 7, mostly composed of Konoha's rookies, along with another team on their path. Naruto did not regret following his convictions and doing what his heart dictated without measuring the consequences of his actions. However, he now found himself tied to a tree, reminiscent of the time during the bell test. He thought to himself that it was bad news for them. He didn't have the scroll they were looking for and had nothing with him. It was the first thing that came to his mind to say, hoping they would understand that he didn't possess the scroll they sought and would let him go. Although he knew it was a rather foolish thought, he had to try. But his attempt was quickly interrupted by one of the enemy team members, who angrily shouted at him to be quiet. One of Karen's teammates, furious at seeing that Naruto didn't have the scroll, struck him in the stomach, leaving Naruto in pain. He struggled to catch his breath and recover from the blow while contemplating how to escape this complicated situation. Shirjeri, another enemy, shouted angrily, calling Naruto more useless than desert sand, while he looked disdainfully at Karen, whom he slapped for her perceived incompetence. Naruto couldn't stand the unfair treatment of the red-haired girl, who had played her part in luring him in. They might be enemies, but no one deserved to be treated that way. Shirjeri turned sharply toward Naruto, furious at his intervention. His face darkened, and his body tensed, ready to attack. He growled that Naruto was just a prisoner and should be grateful they had bothered to capture him alive. He warned Naruto to stay quiet and let them do their job. Naruto despised injustice. He hated seeing those who had no control over a situation being judged and treated violently for the actions of others. One of Karen's other teammates grew angry and punched Naruto in the face. However, the brave red-haired girl spoke up, urging them to leave him alone, insisting that he didn't have the scroll they were looking for. Her defense only infuriated the two male genin further, who believed Karen had no right to speak to them that way. Karen was filled with anger as she faced the crowd. Just as she was about to speak up, a sudden blow knocked her to the ground, and she felt a weight pressing down on her back. Fear surged through her as she sensed hands moving over her, intensifying her panic and insecurity. The unmistakable laughter of Shirogiri echoed around the area while she struggled to free herself from his grasp. He leaned closer, whispering taunts that made her heart race, all the while the cheers and jeers of Katsu and the others filled the air, encouraging Shigiri's actions. Chapter 5. Naruto was aware that his body harbored hidden secrets, like the QB sealed within him. This was a secret of great magnitude that he had discovered in an unfriendly manner. Now, he questioned whether his anger and desire for justice had unleashed this strange power. But there was no time to delve deeper into that thought. It was time to act. He felt powerful, as if he could do anything he pleased. The power of the seal was immense, he thought. Shirogiri growled in frustration as he raised his weapon, determined to end Naruto once and for all. Katsu also drew his kunai, preparing to fight Naruto. He advanced with contempt, eager to see Naruto fall. He ordered Karen, who was trembling in fear on the ground, to stay still as he prepared to take down Naruto. Chains shot out like hounds chasing their prey. Both boys leaped to the side to avoid the attack, but they could not dodge all the chains. 3 chains pursued each of them, and by sheer luck, they managed to evade. Katsu shouted in panic, trying to escape the dangerous chains that threatened to ensnare him. But in a moment of stillness midair, he watched in horror as the chains surrounded him. His heart raced with fear at the sight. Shirogiri was horrified to see his companion trapped by Naruto's chains. He hesitated, torn between attacking Naruto or helping Katsu. But before he could decide, the chains around Katsu began to pull him closer to Naruto. Katsu cried out for help, desperately trying to break free from the chains, but his efforts were futile. The chains lifted him off the ground, bringing him face to face with Naruto. He pleaded for release, his voice filled with desperation. Naruto, devoid of emotion, responded that such filth should not exist in his world. He raised his hands and began to tighten his grip around Katsu's throat. With an ominous creak, the chains constricted further, slowly choking Katsu. His eyes widened in terror, and his mouth opened in a silent scream as the air was forced from his lungs. Shirogiri watched in horror, frozen and unable to intervene. Shirogiri attempted to escape into the trees, but the chains pursued him, wrapping around him like serpents. The situation worsened for both genin, and Naruto seemed to relish every moment of their plight. Shirogiri felt the chains ensnare his feet, climbing up his legs and tightening around his neck. Katsu was not faring any better, as he felt his chakra being drained by the chains. Katsu gasped for breath, struggling as the chains continued their relentless grip. His vision blurred, and his skin turned pale as he succumbed to the suffocating hold. With a final, silent cry, his body relaxed completely, slipping into unconsciousness. Shirogiri was trapped, ensnared by the chains that had wrapped around him like a spider's web. He watched Katsu fall to the ground, motionless, and realized that his end was drawing near as well. He heard a cold, serious voice in his ear, a stark contrast to the kind and playful Naruto he once knew. The voice urged him to accept his fate. As the chains began to pull him toward Naruto, Shirogiri was filled with terror. He understood that this was the end, that his life would conclude in that moment. He tried to speak, to plead for mercy, but his throat had tightened, and he could only emit a pitiful whimper. The chains tightened around his neck, cutting off his air supply. Shirogiri felt his vision darkening, his mind clouding due to the lack of oxygen. With one last effort, he tried to meet Naruto's gaze, but all he saw was a cold, calculating blue. Finally, the chains released the lifeless bodies of the grass ninjas to the ground and returned to Naruto, merging back into his body. He fell to his knees, breathing heavily, shocked by what he had just done. He could hardly believe he had taken 2 lives. He wanted to convince himself that it was the heat of the moment that had driven him to such an act, but deep down, he knew that was a lie. He was fully aware when he committed such an atrocity. He did not enjoy it, but he also felt no remorse. This realization frightened him deeply. Naruto remained silent for a long moment, head bowed and shoulders hunched. He could feel the cold blood coursing through his veins, the sudden awareness of his actions weighing heavily on him. As the initial shock began to fade, guilt and remorse surged within him, like a dark, overwhelming tide. He had crossed an indelible line, taken a path from which he could not return. He lifted his head and looked at the lifeless bodies of the 2 enemy genin on the ground, feeling a profound sorrow for what he had done. It was the first time he had ended a human life. Naruto slowly rose, his movements clumsy and uncertain. His eyes scanned the still forms of Shirogiri and Katsu, taking in the expressions of terror and agony etched on their faces. They were enemies, and it was either them or him. He had killed, he had taken the lives of other human beings. He had never felt anything like it, not even when he had faced death himself. This experience was different, far deeper and more lasting. It was then that he sensed the presence of the red-haired girl approaching him with a firm, guarded stride, making him feel uncomfortable and vulnerable. She reached his side in mere seconds, though for Naruto, it felt like an eternity. He lowered his head, feeling awkward and insecure under her gaze. He knew he had done something terrible, even if it had been to save his own life. She asked if he was okay, her tone laced with concern, noticing that something was amiss. She realized it was the first time the blonde had taken a life and understood, in some way, the weight he now bore. Naruto swallowed hard, struggling to find the right words to respond. His heart raced in his chest, as if it wanted to escape from its bony prison. He finally whispered that he was alive, his voice shaky and filled with bitterness. This has changed everything. What he did. He would never be able to forget it. It was too great, too terrible. The truth was that he wasn't okay. He admitted this honestly, avoiding her gaze and focusing on the ground. He knew that lying wasn't an option, so he preferred to be sincere, even if it meant revealing his fears and weaknesses to a stranger. The red-haired girl leaned in and wrapped her arms around Naruto's shoulders, embracing him gently to calm his troubled heart. He wasn't used to displays of affection, but in that moment, the hug felt comforting. She whispered her thanks while holding him tightly. He responded softly, feeling strangely at ease in her arms. The girl smiled and released him, giving him a warm look that made him feel even more secure. There was no need for gratitude, it was the least she could do after he saved her, she said with a reassuring smile. She was there for him. Naruto felt a lump in his throat at those words. It was the first time someone had offered him support so unconditionally, and he felt deeply grateful. He thanked her sincerely, his voice slightly trembling. The girl moved closer and gently stroked his hair. Naruto leaped between the branches of the trees in search of Kazumi and Saku. The red-haired girl had expressed her gratitude and given him the Earth Scroll. It wasn't as if she needed it. However, when he asked her what she would do next, he realized he didn't even know her name. He felt a bit foolish for forgetting something so basic but decided not to dwell on it. He recalled their earlier encounter, wishing her well on her journey to the capital. He had offered his help, and she had confidently assured him that she could take care of herself, thanking him for his offer. He watched her as she walked away, feeling a strange connection with her, as if they were companions from another time and place. He whispered to himself that he hoped to see her again someday before continuing to leap through the trees. It was okay to dream, he thought quietly while gazing at the horizon. Images of what he had done with his own hands replayed in his mind. He realized he could no longer hear Orochimaru's voice whispering in his ears. He placed his left hand where he had been bitten and felt small protrusions shaped like tiny chains. Interesting, he thought to himself as he examined the chains. They seemed to have the ability to seal and absorb chakra. He realized he could use this power to expand his repertoire of techniques and improve his skills as a ninja. The chains were suppressing the cursed seal, perhaps a natural response of his body to the seal. This is very useful, he said to himself with a smile. With these chains, he could become unstoppable. As he continued jumping from branch to branch, his vision blurred. Suddenly, Naruto fell uncontrollably from the heights, his body crashing to the ground with force. He hit his forehead against a rock, and an intense pain exploded in his skull, plunging him into darkness. He lost consciousness instantly. Lying unconscious on the cold, damp ground, he heard a voice calling him from the darkness. He needed to wake up, they were coming. Naruto slowly opened his eyes, trying to focus on the darkness around him. His head throbbed painfully, and he felt a constant sense of dizziness. He attempted to sit up, but the pain was too intense, and he collapsed again. He groaned weakly, asking who was there and what the voice meant by, "They are coming." It was true, they had taken something from him. He needed to remember and protect himself from them, as they would send their emissaries for his life, trying to end him before he woke up. The voice replied with sorrow. Naruto tried to concentrate, to remember something, anything, but his mind was blank. The pain and confusion were overwhelming. He asked what the voice meant, who these emissaries were, and why they wanted to kill him. He felt lost and alone, completely at the mercy of this mysterious voice that seemed to know more about him than he did himself. Was this just a product of his imagination? He wondered in a whisper to the darkness. The voice fell silent for a moment, as if pondering his question. It finally spoke, saying it was curious that he had asked the same question when they first met. Had they met before? He asked doubtfully. Yes, they had been connected at some point in the past, the voice explained patiently. Although he might not be aware of it now, their paths had crossed before, and in that encounter, they had established a deep bond that persisted to this day. "Who are you?" he asked again. "I am a friend," the voice replied. Naruto fell silent for a moment, processing the information. Then, with a resigned sigh, he accepted the truth and laughed bitterly. He understood. Well, unknown friend, what should he do then? How could he avoid those emissaries? He needed to awaken his true self and reclaim what had been taken from him, the voice insisted. It urged him to listen closely. He couldn't fight them with his current abilities. He needed to find his true nature, the one that belonged to him. Only then could he defeat them. To do this, he must awaken to his original self, the one that existed before they took what belonged to him. First of all, he wasn't any heir, his surname held no prestige or history, and what was there to recover? Secondly, how would he find his true nature? And thirdly, what would happen to him if his original self awakened? The voice remained silent for a moment, reflecting on his words. Naruto, you don't understand anything. Your surname, Uzumaki, is one of the oldest and noblest in the world. As for your true nature, it is something inherent to you, something that has always been within you, waiting to be released. When you awaken to your original self, nothing will change dramatically. You will simply regain your memories and the connection to your true roots. You will be yourself, complete and authentic. By the way, I haven't asked for your name. He wanted to say more but didn't know the name of the voice speaking to him. My name doesn't matter right now, Naruto. What is important is that you understand and accept what I am telling you. Kazumi was helping because she knew Naruto had great potential within him, a potential that had never been developed due to the circumstances he faced. As she spoke, her voice faded into the darkness, leaving Naruto with a sense of urgency and many unanswered questions. The battle against the Sound Ninjas was proving to be more challenging than expected. Kazumi was engaged with two enemies, while Saku struggled to keep up with just one. As Kazumi faced the Sound Ninjas, she noticed they were unlike any other genin she had encountered before. The two enemy genins seemed to possess some sort of physical alteration, though she couldn't quite identify it. Kazumi quickly threw a couple of shuriken, but the Sound Ninjas dodged them effortlessly, displaying remarkable speed and agility. She had no interest in learning their names. The only thing that mattered was that they intended to defeat her if she didn't act swiftly. With her Sharingan activated, she managed to keep the Sound Genin at bay, studying each of their movements with surgical precision. In their brief confrontation, she deduced that these ninjas could manipulate sound waves, giving them a significant advantage. The sound waves emitted by the crouched ninja kept Kazumi at a distance. If Naruto were with them, the odds would be more balanced. Although she didn't want to admit it, Naruto's absence was palpable. It was thanks to him that she had awakened her Sharingan during the mission in the Land of Waves. That moment had filled her with joy, as she had finally awakened her Jujutsu, but she had never thanked him for it. Looking back, Naruto was one of the few in her generation who could keep up with her during training. Hinata was usually her training partner, but she tired after a few hours of practice. In contrast, Naruto seemed to have an endless supply of energy. If given the choice, Kazumi would prefer to train with Naruto over her boyfriend, Hinata. She dodged a sonic attack and watched as it struck a tree, obliterating it effortlessly. She reminded herself to be cautious of their attacks. Even though she could handle both enemies simultaneously, she also needed to assist Saku, who was still being overwhelmed by the sound kunoichi. At times, Saku felt more like a burden than a help to the team, as was the case now. He had the opportunity to strike at the kunoichi's exposed vital points, but he struggled to draw a kunai and make the decisive move. She was occupied, couldn't he see that? It was time for him to act like a true ninja and save himself, as neither she nor Naruto could help him at that moment. Kazumi wondered where Naruto was. With a swift motion, she performed the hand seals for her clan's signature technique, the Great Fireball. The two sound ninjas had to leap in opposite directions to avoid the blazing attack. Kazumi then unleashed the Dragon Flame technique, forcing the bandaged genin to jump again to escape her flames. She had cornered the bandaged genin but had lost sight of the other. She needed to defeat him quickly and then turn her attention to the other sound genin. Drawing a kunai from her pouch, she prepared to finish off the bandaged genin, unaware that the second male sound genin was descending rapidly toward her, kunai in hand, ready to end her life. Kazumi noticed a shadow above her and looked up to see the second genin plummeting down, kunai poised to strike. She couldn't evade him. Her Sharingan allowed her to see movements in slow motion, but it didn't grant her super speed. She cursed under her breath as she realized he was falling too quickly. With one enemy in front of her and another behind, she struggled to find a way out of this dire situation. Then, she spotted something long and sharp approaching in her peripheral vision. A crude stone spear aimed at the black-haired genin. The spear pierced through the genin's right side and pinned him against a nearby tree. A cry of pain escaped the genin's lips as the salt-coated tip intensified his suffering. The sound genin remained impaled, blood spilling onto the tree trunk. Kazumi seized the moment of distraction to turn and face the bandaged genin, who still glared at her with hatred. She thought to herself that he wouldn't kill her today. The genin lunged at her, shouting that she would die. Kazumi blocked his attack with her kunai and delivered a kick to his chest, pushing him away. However, before she could launch her counterattack, her Sharingan detected a second stone spear heading toward the bandaged genin right in front of her. The spear struck from behind, piercing the genin's shoulder and pinning him to the ground. The stone spear held him in place as he struggled to move. Kazumi found herself in a favorable position, with the genin down and unable to defend himself. She thought it was her turn now as she approached the fallen genin. Just then, a new voice echoed in the air, and she recognized it instantly. It was Naruto. His tone sounded tired and worn. Before she could turn, he knocked out the bandaged genin with a powerful blow to the head. Kazumi turned to see him, her heart racing at the sight. Naruto's orange jacket was torn, his blonde hair stained red, and he looked dirty and disheveled. The torn pants and Naruto's eyes, which once radiated life, now appeared dull and devoid of energy. Kazumi was partly surprised by Naruto's appearance, but what truly made her blink was seeing him wielding a spear identical to the one that had pierced the sound genin. With the spear's tip aimed at the neck of the sound genin who had Saku subdued, Naruto urged in a tired and serious tone that he asked one last time for her to let him go. The kunoichi from the sound felt the cold, sharp stone blade against her throat, fully aware of what those crude spears could do, as evidenced by her injured and incapacitated teammates. She was completely alone, with no one to back her up, facing a dangerous and determined Naruto. She responded defiantly, questioning whether he thought he could intimidate her with that long stick and the stone tip. She knew she couldn't release the pretty boy, as he was her ticket to safety. She reminded him that those long sticks had taken down his teammates. Kazumi approached them, asking how she could give a coherent response without shouting it to the world. Naruto replied without taking his eyes off the sound genin, stating that it was since the moment he fought and won against a bear. Kazumi, incredulous, repeated the word, bear, not understanding its relevance at that moment. Naruto offered to tell her the long story later as he slightly moved the spear's tip against the girl's neck, causing her to flinch as she felt the sharp stone cut into her skin. He asked her one last time, kindly, to let Saku go. The genin realized she had no other option and released Saku, who quickly ran to Kazumi for protection. Naruto dropped his spear to the ground and swiftly approached the sound kunoichi, delivering a strong punch to her face. She fell to the ground, bleeding from her mouth and nose, her furious gaze meeting Naruto's. He explained that the punch was for wasting his time, while Kazumi and Saku watched in shock. Naruto turned his back on the scene, picked up his spear, and walked toward the bandaged sound genin who remained unconscious. He knew what he was about to do would wake him. Positioning himself behind the genin, he grabbed the spear and yanked it in the opposite direction from which it had entered. The sound genin screamed in desperation as the spear was violently pulled out, causing blood to flow from his wound. Naruto told him to be a man and endure the pain, reminding him that he had been pierced by a scythe moments earlier without screaming. Naruto approached the second male member of the sound team, who was impaled about 2 meters high. With an agile jump, he grabbed the spear's handle and forcefully removed it from the genin, who fell heavily to the ground. He ordered the remaining members to leave and take their companions with them. The kunoichi groaned in pain, holding her broken nose from Naruto's punch. Struggling, she got up and dragged her teammates away, disappearing into the foliage. Kazumi was taken aback by the violence of her blonde teammate toward the sound genin team. Saku couldn't believe how Naruto was acting. Naruto commanded those hiding to come out, driving the 3 stone spears into the ground. Kazumi and Saku heard footsteps approaching through the underbrush, and soon Team 9 appeared, followed by Team 10 in another direction, and finally Team 8 coming from the opposite side of Team Naruto stated that he would say it was good to see them again, but this time it wasn't. Now they were enemies, and if they tried anything against him, he would not hesitate to hurt them to ensure their survival. He openly threatened the group with his words, leaving most of them surprised. Saku protested, reminding him that they were their comrades. Naruto snapped back, telling her to be quiet, reminding her that she had been unable to handle her enemy and that he had to save her life again. He questioned when she would be able to take care of herself. Kiba, angered, pointed out that it was a threat. Naruto clarified that it was a warning, locking eyes with him while his body tensed, ready to grab the spears and attack. Kazumi wondered if Naruto was truly willing to attack them, noticing his tense posture, muscles ready to strike at former allies. She approached him slowly, placing her right hand on his left shoulder, trying to calm him down without understanding why he was acting this way. She noted it was curious that he defended them now when he barely acknowledged their existence in the academy. She assumed he hadn't noticed her until they were assigned as a team, understandable for someone elitist who only looked up. Naruto brushed her hand off his shoulder, examining the spears closely. Kazumi felt offended by his words, her expression hardening as her fists clenched tightly at her sides. Taking a deep breath to calm herself, she prepared to respond. Before she could reply to Naruto's last remark, he turned away and walked into the forest with the spears resting on his shoulders. Saku gathered her courage to ask where he was going. Naruto stopped and turned to look at her, answering concisely that he was going to look for water. He stated he would be back in 10 minutes, and if they weren't gone by then, he would deal with Kiba. Kiba shouted angrily for him to come back, ready to chase after Naruto to make him pay. However, his advance was halted by his teammate Shino Aburame. Kiba questioned why Shino was getting in his way, irritated by his intervention. He shot a questioning look at Shino, silently asking if he was taking Naruto's side. Shino replied that Kiba was not a match for Naruto at that moment. He assured Kiba that despite Naruto appearing exhausted, he had more chakra than everyone present combined. He pointed out what Naruto had done to those sound ninjas with the spears. Shino responded seriously, having received information from his insects. Kiba might have good reserves of chakra, but comparing his chakra to Naruto's was like comparing a puddle to a lake. Naruto was the lake, while Kiba was merely the puddle. Kiba, still angry, insisted that it didn't mean he couldn't land a few hits. Shino, with a stern tone, pointed out that it also didn't mean Kiba wouldn't end up impaled by those spears. Kazumi watched as her teammate walked away, ignoring the conversation between Kiba and Shino. Naruto's words lingered in her mind. Despite her reluctance to admit it, she had to acknowledge that Naruto was right. His words held truth, especially regarding her elitist attitude. During her time at the academy, she had ignored everyone except Hinata, overlooking their existence. Reflecting on this, particularly in relation to Naruto, she realized that he was truly alone in the world. The blonde was completely isolated, without parents or true friends, only acquaintances. This understanding allowed her to grasp in some way his restless behavior. His excessive passion for jokes was a cry for attention, a call to be noticed. Remembering his antics during their time at the academy, she found his jokes and constant attempts to draw attention annoying. She had never stopped to consider the reasons behind those jokes. Now, after his words and actions, she began to understand Naruto and his personality better. Hinata approached Kazumi, asking if she was okay, pulling her out of her thoughts. Kazumi replied that she was fine, just a bit tired. Although Hinata wasn't entirely convinced, she chose to accept the response. Just as Hinata was about to say something, Ino intervened, starting a conversation while both girls tried to redirect her attention. Ino curiously inquired about Naruto, but Kazumi quickly lied, saying it was nothing important, not wanting to discuss the topic. Hinata urged Ino to leave them alone, trying to steer the conversation elsewhere. With enthusiasm, Rock Lee shouted that Team 9 was leaving and they headed off, having no reason to stay. It seemed none of them had the scroll they needed. Hinata turned to look at her cousin, who returned her gaze with hostility. She wanted to ask how he was doing but knew it would be a dangerous risk, as she valued her life. Her cousin's team disappeared among the trees. Choji attempted to get Shikamaru's attention, who was initially unresponsive. When he finally turned his head, he found Choji watching him, concerned. Choji noted that Shikamaru seemed distracted and asked if he had noticed Naruto's strange behavior, as he didn't seem like himself. Shikamaru acknowledged that he had noticed. Choji expressed relief that his friend had observed the same oddity, explaining that Naruto was acting strangely. Shikamaru suggested that it might be the stress of the exam, though he didn't seem convinced by his own words. He sensed there was something more, something he couldn't quite define. He recalled seeing a hole in Naruto's shirt, both an entry and exit wound on his abdomen, yet there appeared to be nothing there. It seemed as if something had pierced Naruto. Shikamaru knew Naruto well enough to realize something was wrong. The first sign was when he saw Naruto attack the sound genin fiercely, followed by witnessing him remove the spears from them, then humiliating Sakura, and finally threatening them all. Kazumi approached, having overheard their conversation, and asked what Shikamaru meant by the hole in Naruto's abdomen. Hinata felt a surge of jealousy at Kazumi's concern for Naruto, her boyfriend, wishing she could ask him how he had been in the forest. Shikamaru explained that he had noticed 2 deep cuts on Naruto's jacket, likely made by a sword or similar object. Kazumi challenged this, stating that if that were the case, she would have noticed it immediately, and there would be blood on his clothes. Shikamaru countered that she was only scratching the surface, not delving deeper into the details or the blood in his hair. The real questions remained. What was happening to Naruto? Had caused such a drastic change? Naruto leaped agilely from branch to branch, eager to reach the river he had left behind moments ago. The water was his main motivation, but he also wanted to avoid an unwanted encounter with his former academy classmates. He had no desire to speak with any of them. Upon reaching the riverbank, he paused to gaze at his reflection in the water. His blonde hair was stained with blood, and his right hand clutched his abdomen, where a scythe had pierced him. His thoughts drifted back to recent events. In a flashback, Naruto had been tracking his team, using the memories of his clone that had been with them. Suddenly, he sensed a malevolent presence nearby. Though common sense told him not to investigate, his curious nature prevailed. He focused and followed the source of the disturbance, soon finding himself face to face with a monster resembling a golden vase floating in the air. The creature had a vase-like body, numerous eyes, 2 on the top of its head, 3 on its face, 2 more on its shoulders, and 1 large eye on its chest. Most of the eyes had black and red sclera with blue irises. The eye on its chest had 2 additional layers, 1 black and 1 yellow, while the one on its forehead appeared to have a red iris and a vertical blue pupil. His body was adorned with various decorative orange lines. Additionally, he had 4 dark brown stripes on his chest resembling those of a tiger. The middle of his body opened into a massive mouth filled with flat incisors and a large, dark gray tongue that dripped red at the tip. The upper and lower parts of his body ended in spiral-shaped points, and his head appeared vaguely hooded. He wore what seemed to be a cloak and wielded a large golden scythe, decorated with flame designs, along with another eye that was black, red, and blue. The monster shouted, "Uzumaki," as it lunged toward Naruto. Naruto prepared for battle, knowing he had to act quickly to defeat the creature. He dodged and attempted a direct attack, but the monster's scythe was too fast and powerful. Realizing he needed to find a weakness in the monster's defense, Naruto decided to divert its attention. He created a shadow clone and sent it toward the monster. The creature easily dispatched the clone with a simple vertical slash of its scythe. Naruto created more clones, but the monster ignored them, which was exactly what Naruto wanted. He quickly switched places with a nearby clone. Seizing the opportunity, Naruto managed to climb onto the monster's back and positioned himself on its shoulder. The monster shook violently, trying to throw him off, but Naruto held on tightly. As the monster swung its scythe over its shoulder, Naruto nimbly jumped, causing the monster to injure itself. The monster roared in anger, cursing Naruto while the young ninja desperately threw kunai and shurikens, trying to find a way to defeat it. However, his attempts were easily deflected by the monster's skill. The battle intensified as the monster grew more formidable. Naruto dodged the scythe attacks, using everything at his disposal to fight back. But as he realized he had no weapons left, he regretted using them all without saving any for critical moments like this. "You've run out of weapons, Uzumaki. This will be your end," the monster shouted with glee, confident it would finally eliminate its sworn enemy. It moved forward with incredible speed, catching Naruto off guard. The monster's scythe struck him in the abdomen, causing him to cry out in pain. "Suffer, Uzumaki. Feel what we felt," the monster declared, its eyes filled with rage and hatred. In that moment, questions flooded Naruto's mind. What did the monster mean by "we"? Were there others like it in the world? With a swift motion, the monster withdrew its weapon, causing Naruto to fall to his knees, clutching his wounded abdomen. In a quick movement, the monster raised its scythe and brought it down forcefully toward Naruto. With quick thinking, Naruto jumped back just in time to avoid being struck. However, some blood from the scythe splattered onto his blonde hair. When he looked up, he was met with the monster's furious shout, accusing him of refusing to accept defeat as a warrior. "You are worse than a cockroach," the monster yelled. It demanded that Naruto accept his defeat as his ancestors had. "I am not like them," Naruto declared with a defiant smile, provoking a furious growl from the monster as it lunged at him. However, it had to stop abruptly to dodge a projectile heading its way. Naruto's eyes locked onto the object with determination. It was a makeshift stone spear he had hastily crafted. "You think that simple stick will defeat me?" the monster scoffed, noticing shadow clones appearing beside the original Naruto. Naruto felt himself regenerating, silently thanking the fox for healing him. "You will never hurt me with those twigs." "Who knows? Maybe I will, maybe I won't," Naruto replied, slowly rising to his feet with his abdomen healed, grasping a spear that a clone had handed him. "What I am sure of is that I have to defeat you." With seriousness, Naruto aimed the spear at the monster. "Try it, Uzumaki," the monster challenged him. In a flash, Naruto swung his spear and charged at the monster. With speed and skill, He dodged the monster's scythe strikes while landing several hits on its eyes with the spear. The monster roared in pain, but Naruto pressed on, continuing his assault. "You coward!" the monster shouted, retreating from Naruto. "Where's that confidence you had about not being hurt by those twigs?" Naruto taunted, having successfully struck the monster's eyes. "You've just been lucky." The monster refused to believe that Naruto had injured it with his spear skills. It lunged at him again, determined to finish him off once and for all. "Do you think you can defeat me?" the monster roared, its voice echoing in the air. "It's not about believing," Naruto replied firmly. "It's about doing it." With his spear and the help of his clones, Naruto managed to strike several of the monster's eyes, significantly weakening it. Only 3 eyes remained, 2 on the top of its head and 1 large eye on its chest. The monster couldn't comprehend the damage it had sustained from Naruto. In an unexpected move, Naruto turned to the ground. The monster charged at him, but Naruto threw dirt into its eyes. Momentarily blinded, the creature left a gap in its defense. Naruto seized the perfect opportunity and gathered all his strength for a powerful spear move. He drove the weapon into the monster's main eye, causing it to collapse to the ground, defeated. After a moment, the monster vanished into thin air, leaving Naruto alone with the scythe. This magnificent weapon, capable of slicing through rocks and trees effortlessly, now lay embedded in the ground with the handle upright. Naruto touched it carefully, feeling the residual energy of the battle. What other secrets did this world of monsters and battles hold? As he grasped the scythe, it shattered into 1,000 pieces. Naruto stared in surprise as the fragments began to float in the air, swirling around his left arm. Slowly, the markings slid down the sleeve of his orange jacket, merging with his skin. He lifted the sleeve, revealing a tattoo, a scythe etched on his forearm. The tattoo seemed alive, its lines undulating and sharp. Naruto quickly realized that the tattoo resembled the scythe itself. How was this possible? What did it mean? Was it a gift or a curse? Questions flooded his mind as he examined the intricate design. He murmured to himself, struggling to comprehend the situation, feeling the energy of the tattoo pulse beneath his skin. He was uncertain whether the symbol posed a threat, but one thing was clear: his life had taken an unexpected turn. After that encounter with the creature and the new tattoo he had acquired, Naruto resumed tracking his team. The rest was history. As he cupped his hands to drink from the river, he had to pull them back at the sight of blood flowing from upstream. He stood up and began walking upstream, searching for the source of the contamination, muttering about how the water had become tainted just when he was about to drink it. In an unknown location, a voice filled with disdain whispered about a failed mission. Another voice, indifferent, acknowledged the failure, having just consumed the soul of the one who had faltered. The demon they had unleashed had one job, but it seemed to be too much for him. This was an unfavorable sign for them. The first voice insisted that the phenomenon must be exterminated before it showed more signs of awakening. It had taken considerable effort to seal it, and the other's misguided benevolence had led to this predicament. The indifferent voice dismissed the concern, gazing out the window, contemplating the next move. In a different scene, Kazumi expressed her frustration, insisting that Naruto was fine. It was exhausting that their conversations always revolved around him. Yet, she was reminded of the saying, "There is none so blind as those who will not see." Her stubbornness prevented her from recognizing the changes in Naruto. Did she not realize he was no longer the same? Something had shifted in the once carefree boy from the academy. Shikamaru pointed out that he saw a different Naruto, one who attacked mercilessly and even threatened his friends. That was not typical of him. Choji silently supported Shikamaru's words with a nod. Kazumi frowned, crossing her arms, still believing they were exaggerating. Perhaps he was just stressed about the exam. Shikamaru sighed, feeling exasperated. He remarked that talking to her was like talking to a stone, noting that at least stones did not respond. He decided to let her think what she wanted, knowing her behavior while she was proud and arrogant, justified by her status as the best in their class, hailing from an elite clan with exceptional skills. Yet, reality was often more complex than appearances. Resigned to Kazumi's stubbornness, Shikamaru told her to do as she wished but warned her not to say she hadn't been warned when things got serious. He noted that they needed to find the missing scroll, realizing that Team 7 already had both scrolls. Stealing them would be nearly impossible due to their numerical disadvantage and the complications of planning such a theft. He turned and began walking, with Choji and Ino following. Kazumi watched her teammates leave, feeling a mix of irritation and confusion. How could they be so sure something was wrong with Naruto? She had noticed his strange behavior, but that didn't necessarily mean there was a serious problem. Just then, she heard a familiar voice behind her, recognizing it as Naruto's. He had returned just moments before he was supposed to. Shikamaru acknowledged Naruto without turning around, while Ino corrected him, stating they were leaving. Kazumi turned to Naruto, noticing that he looked slightly better. Although he still appeared tired, the pallor of his face had faded, and his eyes sparkled with life, free of blood. Yet, something still felt off, as if he were hiding something. Naruto declared that he wouldn't apologize for threatening Shikamaru, Ino, Choji, or anyone else, as they were in a test where their lives were at stake and there were no friends. Shikamaru sighed, rubbing the back of his neck, and told Naruto that while he understood the danger, it didn't justify losing control and threatening former classmates. They were all experiencing the same stress, and he needed to keep his composure. Kazumi observed the scene in silence, her dark eyes fixed on Naruto. The way he spoke and the coldness in his tone suggested a part of him had changed, adopting a more calculating demeanor. Naruto suggested they should leave before getting into a fight they couldn't win, shifting his gaze from Shikamaru to Ino and Choji. Shikamaru questioned whether Naruto believed he could take on all three of them, noting that Sakura and Kazumi wouldn't help him. Naruto chuckled softly, lacking humor, and stated he didn't need anyone to fight for him. He could handle it alone, and as for the three of them, they would see who emerged victorious. Kazumi intervened, telling Naruto that it was enough and that Shikamaru and the others were leaving. Naruto clicked his tongue and took a few steps back, not in the mood to argue with her. Shikamaru silently thanked Kazumi for her intervention. Kazumi watched as Shikamaru, Ino, and Choji walked away, sensing that something was indeed wrong with Naruto. Meanwhile, Naruto leaned against a nearby tree, eating some jerky. Kazumi stood there, watching Naruto and wondering what could be going through his mind at that moment. He suggested that they should leave, and Kazumi noticed that the Uzumaki was surprisingly calm. She agreed, knowing they needed to go. Although she didn't want to leave Hinata, she understood that Hinata likely had other responsibilities besides being with him. Moreover, she wanted to avoid any confrontation between the two teams. Kiba was clearly still upset, and she needed to talk to Naruto. Hinata waved goodbye to Kazumi, almost leaning in for a kiss but quickly remembering their relationship was a secret. Kazumi nodded, giving Hinata one last look before turning to Naruto, ready to move on. They had much work ahead of them. Naruto, munching on some jerky, commented on the obviousness of Kazumi and Hinata's feelings for each other. Kazumi and Hinata tensed at his words, realizing their relationship might not be as secret as they thought. Saku, Kiba, and Shino were confused by Naruto's comment. Kazumi frowned, feeling a surge of anger. How dare he expose her relationship with Hinata like that? Yet, a part of her wondered how he had figured it out. Had they been too careless? Saku, gaining confidence, asked Naruto what he meant. Naruto shrugged, dismissing her inquiry. Saku wanted to press further but decided against it, sensing Naruto's mood. Kazumi cleared her throat, attempting to change the subject. They needed to keep moving. Hinata insisted they should leave, eager to reach the tower and rest. Kazumi and Saku agreed, wanting to arrive at the tower and talk to Naruto along the way. Meanwhile, Anko leaped from tree to tree, searching for the daughter of the Uchiha clan leader. She knew the forest like the back of her hand but had yet to find her or her team. Frustration bubbled within her as she paused, hearing voices nearby. One voice was filled with anger, accusing another of cowardice for attacking from behind. Another voice, equally furious, blamed a teammate for not finishing off a target when they had the chance. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dancing shadows on the forest floor. Anko concealed herself behind a tree, straining to gather more information. The argument escalated, and one of the boys struck another with a branch, causing a yelp of pain. Anko listened intently, her mind racing as she processed the situation. The injured boy, Dosu, recognized that they needed to rest and regroup, focusing on their main objective, obtaining the scrolls. Anko understood that the Uchiha girl was a priority target for her former sensei, and now she realized these ninjas were also after her. The group agreed with Dosu's plan, and Anko pieced together that they had been sent by Orochimaru to test the Uchiha's potential with the cursed seal. Zuko, still fuming, kicked a nearby rock, expressing his frustration at missing their chance to eliminate the Uchiha. Dosu, despite his injuries, urged them to focus on their true target, the annoying Uzumaki. Unbeknownst to them, they were part of a larger experiment. Anko, still hidden, observed their conversation, noting the severity of their injuries. She analyzed the situation, realizing that a kunai alone wouldn't cause such wounds unless enhanced with chakra. Suddenly, a voice interrupted her thoughts, commenting on the state of the two boys. Anko turned to see a girl with striking green eyes and wavy black hair, a playful smile on her lips. The girl leaned closer, whispering for Anko to be quiet, clearly enjoying the moment. Anko was taken aback. How had this girl approached her without being detected? She had only noticed her when she spoke again. Anko considered whether her skills were fading or if this girl was exceptionally stealthy. The girl then asked Anko if she wanted to see a trick, her excitement palpable. Anko was about to refuse, to tell the stranger no, but the unknown girl didn't wait for her response. She instructed Anko to fix her gaze on the branch held by the girl from the Sound Village. Anko focused intently on the branch, waiting for something to happen, but nothing occurred. Anko questioned what she was supposed to see, turning her head toward the girl, who had her eyes closed and a hand on her chin. The girl seemed to be contemplating whether to perform a classic trick or something more extravagant. Anko, growing impatient, urged her to simply do whatever she needed to do. The girl decided on a classic trick, and Anko continued to watch the girl from the Sound Village and the branch she held. The girl with wavy black hair remained still, and Anko's impatience grew as nothing happened. Suddenly, the kunoichi from the Sound Village was engaged in a heated discussion with her teammate. In response to a comment that had annoyed her, she swung the branch upward and struck her teammate. The girl with intense green eyes, a mysterious smile on her lips, began to move one of her fingers rhythmically. In an instant, the wood transformed before Anko's astonished eyes, disintegrating into thousands of tiny silver particles that swirled around the kunoichi from the sound. In the blink of an eye, the particles merged, forming a snake. Anko was taken aback, surprised by the transformation. The branch had turned into a green snake that coiled around the kunoichi's arm. She glanced back at the girl, who was enjoying the panic and futile attempts of the kunoichi to free herself from the snake. The girl wore a playful smile. Anko had seen people turn branches into snakes before, but it was always through genjutsu or transformation techniques, and those snakes lacked life. This was different, and intrigue washed over her. What secret ability did this mysterious girl possess? The girl playfully asked if Anko liked her little trick, still watching the spectacle unfolding below. It was amusing for her to see the genin with black hair struggling to get the snake off while her teammates stood ready, interpreting the scene as a potential threat. Although the snake was not attacking, it playfully wrapped around the kunoichi's arm. Anko, maintaining a calm facade but feeling nervous inside, couldn't help but ask how she had done that. The girl responded with a mischievous smile, hinting at a secret. Meanwhile, Uchiha Itachi, a 17-year-old with black hair and dark eyes, traveled back to Konoha alongside his cousin, Uchiha Shisui, who had short spiky black hair. Shisui, dressed in a high-collared black shirt and long pants, teased Itachi about his younger sister eventually having a boyfriend. Itachi, serious, expressed his concern about her getting hurt, especially since her boyfriend was the heir of the Hyuga clan. Shisui summarized Itachi's worries, prompting Itachi to prepare a response. However, his words were cut off by the deafening cry of an eagle echoing through the forest. Shisui asked if he had heard it, and Itachi confirmed he had, wondering what kind of eagle could produce such a sound. They paused to analyze the situation, and an unexpected gust of wind stirred up dust in the clearing, prompting them to shield their eyes. As the dust settled, they were captivated by a creature that was part bird and part lion, sitting before them. Shursui pointed out the recent bandages on its right leg, drawing Itachi out of his trance. Itachi hadn't noticed before, but now he couldn't take his eyes off the strange creature, which regarded them calmly, suggesting it either did not see them as a threat or was powerful enough to disregard them. Shikamaru reflected on his recent conversation with Naruto, feeling he could have spoken more and learned what was happening with him. He noticed changes in Naruto, uncertain if they were for better or worse. As they approached the tower, he set those thoughts aside, reminding himself that at the end of the day, he and Naruto were merely acquaintances. Something compelled her to cross the treacherous ocean and reach the elemental nations, specifically Konoha. It all began with a dream, as they say, everything that is or ever was started with a dream. She was the princess and heir to the throne of the frozen territories, born during the greatest storm her kingdom had ever experienced. According to her mother, when she came into the world that night, the storm calmed, the sky filled with dark clouds cleared, and the moon shone brighter than ever before. Her beloved father claimed that she was a gift from the gods to them. They had tried countless times to have a child, but all their hopes had been in vain, with dozens of attempts ending in failure. Her dear mother prayed daily to the gods for a child, until one spring afternoon she discovered she was pregnant. That day, the frozen territories celebrated with joy. Their beloved queen was expecting an heir. Her mother said that spring was the most beautiful yet the most fearful time of her life. The reason? She was destined to be born in the heart of winter. In the frozen territories, most women prefer to conceive during the winter months, so newborns arrive in the early days of spring when the weather is warm. Spring lasts 4 months in the icy lands, while the rest of the year remains shrouded in winter's chill. March marks the beginning of spring, heralded by the migration of golden-breasted geese. These birds embark on a long journey from the south to the shores of the frozen territories to lay their eggs during the spring season. They cross the vast ocean in search of a safe place to bring forth the next generation. The birds are fortunate to be able to fly, but the frozen lands often find themselves cut off due to the treacherous ocean that separates them from other continents. Only the most experienced navigators dare to venture into the Black Ocean. There are 3 continents: the frozen lands, the elemental nations, and the Sekido Tairiku, continent of rebirth. The latter is an isolated continent and the closest neighbor to the frozen lands. The journey from the frozen lands to the elemental nations can take 3 to 4 weeks, provided the ship's captain is skilled at navigating the Black Ocean, where strong currents prevail for most of the year. The Black Ocean, also known as the Restless Sea, is one of the most dangerous seas in the world. Its name comes from its dark, murky color and the constant storms that batter its waters. However, navigating it is extremely perilous due to the strong currents and relentless storms. The inhabitants of the frozen lands have grown accustomed to extreme cold, but that does not mean they do not require suitable clothing for the climate. Coats made from woolly mammoth fur are essential for facing the frigid conditions. There was a time when woolly mammoths were on the brink of extinction. At the beginning of the last century, they were nearly extinct, with only a few thousand remaining in the cold northern territories. However, today, their numbers have significantly increased thanks to conservation efforts. The species was saved by the 17th king of the northern territories, Jalmer Frostheim, the Unifier. His legacy endures in history as the first king of the frozen lands, a leader who protected both his people and the majestic beasts that roamed his domain. He had observed that the herds of mammoths were no longer as large as they once were. The herds were dwindling over time. The number of mammoths gradually decreased as the years passed, and recognizing this trend, he knew the species was in danger. If the mammoths disappeared, it would be detrimental to the food supply in his territory. Faced with this threat, the king launched a conservation campaign to protect the species. He understood that if he did not act, the mammoths could face the same extinction as other species in the past. Frostheim worked tirelessly to save the woolly mammoths. Through protection strategies and population management, he succeeded in increasing their numbers. His efforts did not go unnoticed by the other clans in the territory. The other clans were facing famine, as woolly mammoths had already become extinct in those areas of the icy continent. The kings of the other regions began to conspire against the king of the north. One cold winter morning, the tribes attacked the king of the north. That war occurred 450 years ago. The journey continued in silence, with only the sound of their leaps between the branches of the trees. Honestly, they could hardly believe that the person leading the way was Naruto. It wasn't that Naruto was bad at navigating. In fact, he had guided the team on several occasions, but always in a noisy manner. The strange thing now was that they were traveling in silence with him. For both of them, traveling with a quiet Naruto was difficult to define. It felt as if something unnatural was happening, something that should not be possible, something that went against all expectations. Kazumi broke the silence after a long time, calling out to Naruto. He turned to her, their gazes meeting blue and onyx. She expressed her concern when he did not respond. Then, she watched as Naruto fell backward to the ground, unconscious. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. Time stopped. Naruto opened his eyes and found himself lying in a sewer, the water reaching up to his ears. He looked around. A large cage adorned the door with a seal. Water dripped, bouncing and splashing in a steady rhythm, like the ticking of a metronome. Taking a deep breath, he focused on the cage. As he stood up, he noticed that the water barely reached his ankles. If he had been here a few months ago, he would have wondered what strange place this was. But he was no fool, he knew exactly where he was. It was the cage of the QB, the seal that trapped it within his body. Though the QB was contained, its presence remained palpable and imposing. The chakra filled the air, making it vibrate with each breath Naruto took. It was a tremendous power, capable of destroying entire countries if not kept under control. He murmured to himself, acknowledging the fox's presence. Then, a pair of enormous crimson eyes watched him from the shadows behind the bars. For some strange reason, the blonde blinked in surprise but felt no fear. On the contrary, he was genuinely curious. He remarked on the fox's size, noting it was even larger than he had imagined. The crimson eyes blinked in confusion, clearly not expecting such a response. The QB demanded to be freed, but Naruto questioned why he would do that, expressing disbelief at the complexity of the seal. Naruto pondered whether he could break free simply by tearing at the restraints. He was not trying to convince the fox, but he felt the need to address it. He raised his hands in a gesture of peace and asked if the creature had a name, finding it demeaning to refer to it as just fox. He noted that even the dogs his teacher summoned had names. The fox, confused by Naruto's words, insisted it would not reveal its name, claiming Naruto did not deserve to know it. Naruto shrugged, looking around the sewer they were in, and pointed out that calling it fox was insulting to both of them, though more so to the creature. The fox expressed a desire for freedom rather than comfort, stating that it couldn't wait for Naruto's life to end. Naruto, however, was determined to live, explaining that he had no plans to die anytime soon. The fox was taken aback, shocked by Naruto's resolve. It expressed its frustration at being trapped, especially within Naruto. Naruto retorted that he had not asked to be the fox's jailer and suggested that the creature should not have attacked the place where he was born. The fox was bewildered by Naruto's calm demeanor, but Naruto explained that he had spent a lot of time thinking about the fox since he learned of its existence within him. He mentioned his interest in learning more about seals, hoping to find a way to help them both. The fox scoffed at Naruto's naivety, reminding him that it was a manifestation of evil and chakra. Naruto, unfazed, noted that he had seen and done many strange things, and the presence of a giant demon behind a seal was not his primary concern. He asked if the fox had finished its threats, as he was trying to be civil. The fox's claws shot out between the bars, nearly grazing Naruto's face, and it expressed its disdain for Naruto's attempts at kindness. Naruto blinked, feeling insulted but determined to maintain a civil conversation. The fox vehemently rejected the idea of working together, preferring to be anywhere else than trapped with Naruto. Naruto was curious about the fox's knowledge of his mother, asking if it had met her. The fox revealed that it had known her for much of her life and recalled how she had eagerly awaited Naruto's birth. This revelation sparked a flicker of hope in Naruto, who sought to learn more about his mother from the fox. However, when he asked for her name, the fox coldly refused, turning away and leaving Naruto disheartened. Naruto felt a wave of sadness wash over him, questioning the purpose of the fox mentioning his mother if it would not share her name. The fox responded that there was no purpose, it merely noted the resemblance between Naruto and his mother. Just as Naruto was about to inquire further, he felt himself fading from the conversation, vowing to return for answers. Meanwhile, a minute earlier, Kazumi called out to Naruto, sensing something was wrong when he did not respond. She watched in horror as he fell backward, unconscious. Time seemed to slow as she felt her heart race, overwhelmed by an urge to save him. Without a second thought, she launched herself toward him, knowing he would do the same for her. As she descended, the wind whipped through her hair, and her determination grew with each passing moment. She reached out, desperate to catch him before it was too late. Just before they hit the ground, she embraced him tightly, trying to steer them toward a tree branch for safety. The ground loomed closer, and she braced herself for the impact, thinking it would be a rough landing. She shouted for him to wake up, holding him tightly. Naruto slowly opened his eyes, his vision blurry. He realized he was in Kazumi's embrace and that they were still falling. Panic set in as he understood the urgency of the situation. He quickly thought about how to minimize the impact they would soon face. Now he was lying on his back, and Kazumi would not take as much damage. Most of it would be his. He had to bear the brunt of it. It was his fault they were in danger. He closed his eyes and braced himself for the impact with the ground, holding Kazumi tightly and waiting for the pain to hit. Naruto closed his eyes with determination as he prepared for the imminent impact. His mind focused on protecting Kazumi at all costs, feeling responsible for her being in danger. With a resigned sigh, he held Kazumi tightly, ensuring she was as protected as possible. He could feel the rapid beating of his heart, mixed with the sweet and comforting scent of her hair. He hadn't realized until that moment how pleasant her hair smelled. The world around them blurred as they plummeted, the wind whistling in their ears and whipping their hair. A chill ran down his spine, but Naruto remained steadfast, his protective embrace unwavering. Time seemed to slow in that moment, each second stretching into eternity. Then the impact came, shaking all of his senses. The ground roared beneath them, sending waves of discomfort through their bodies. The sensation spread quickly, every muscle and bone feeling the force. Naruto grunted, struggling to contain the discomfort, but he refused to let go of Kazumi. His priority was to protect her, even at the cost of his own well-being. He let out a muffled cry as he felt the impact against the ground, the air violently escaping his lungs. The collision was intense. Gradually, the dizziness and disorientation began to fade. Naruto opened his eyes slowly, finding the blurry sight of the ground before him. As his vision cleared, he realized they were both nearly unscathed. A sigh of relief escaped his lips, mixed with a hint of astonishment. He had no broken bones, which seemed strange. Thought for a moment that the strength and determination with which he had held Kazumi had minimized the impact and protected her from serious harm. But that couldn't be. There had to be another reason he hadn't been injured. With careful movements, Naruto released his hold, allowing Kazumi to stand. He remained on the ground for a moment longer. He apologized to Kazumi for losing consciousness, feeling responsible for her near injury. He could barely meet her gaze, knowing that it was his fault she had almost been harmed. Although losing consciousness wasn't entirely his fault, he felt a sense of responsibility. Kazumi expressed her genuine concern for him, asking if he was truly okay, realizing that Naruto was not well. A female voice shouted as she pulled a man away from a table covered with papers, snatching a particularly important golden document from his hands. Kuragami insisted on having the paper, claiming it would solve many problems that had arisen in recent days. They struggled over the document, oblivious to a third person entering the room. The newcomer informed them that the princess was near the boy, closing the door behind him and watching as his companions continued to fight over the golden paper, which he recognized as a high-level remote seal created 300 years ago. As Naruto lay on the ground, a question crossed his mind. What had truly brought them together? Their rivalry, perhaps, But beyond that, there was nothing more. They tolerated each other, and the bond that had formed felt unnatural, almost primitive, as if it had existed since the dawn of the ninja world. Kazumi would never admit it, but she was worried about Naruto. She feigned exhaustion, claiming she had fainted from fatigue, hoping to downplay the incident. She smiled, trying to appear convincing, not fully understanding what had led to her fainting. She didn't want Kazumi's concern. She didn't need anything from her. She didn't need anything from the perfect girl, the model student, the prodigy. She didn't need pity or to be saved. She only needed to increase her power. If she had more power, Kakashi-sensei would train her more often, and she would be his favorite. She just needed more power to finally be recognized. Kazumi watched Naruto closely as he lay on the ground, recovering from the fall. His self-sacrificing attitude was nothing new. Naruto realized he had been harboring negative thoughts about his teammate. He was impulsive and always striving to surpass himself, but he noticed a slight change in his demeanor. He was becoming darker, and an insatiable hunger for power was emerging within him, something he had never expected to feel. He wanted power, but for recognition that seemed unworthy. He sought power to protect his loved ones and to gain acknowledgement from a village that treated him as if he were the source of all its troubles. They were not the center of the world. They should understand that they were just a small, insignificant part of it. Kazumi challenged him, stating she didn't believe him, noticing he was acting differently. Naruto wondered when she had started caring about his well-being. There had been moments of concern from her, but they were rare and often felt like a repayment for the times he had saved her life. Kazumi's gaze was firm and direct, and she saw a dark glimmer in Naruto's eyes, a relentless ambition for power that frightened her. Those eyes were not the same as before. She made it clear that she didn't want to owe him anything. She had likely acted that way for a reason. It seemed they were even now, with no debts left between them. He responded with a cheeky smile, which only served to irritate Kazumi. If something happened to him, it would affect the entire team, and it wasn't as if he truly cared about the debt. They were supposed to be professionals. Kazumi moved swiftly, lifting him off the ground. She expected him to respond truthfully after she had saved him from imminent danger. She was genuinely angry with the blue-eyed blonde, who looked at her as if to say he hadn't asked for her help. Naruto felt Kazumi's grip holding him suspended in the air, her gaze locked onto him. He managed to break free from her hold and stood up, looking directly at her. Kazumi noticed that Naruto's eyes, which should have sparkled with life, were now filled with anger and despair. They seemed lifeless, lacking their usual spark. He slowly expressed his exhaustion, making sure she understood. He was truly tired and just wanted to reach the tower, have a decent meal, take a bath, and rest for a moment. But he knew he had to let it all out. He was weary of telling himself every day that he was strong and that nothing could bring him down, just to keep moving forward and persevere toward a goal that nearly everyone said was impossible. He was tired of the looks from those who saw him as worthless, and he was exhausted from always being the good one, the one who had to see the positive side of life, even when he had experienced so little good himself. Naruto's eyes shone with contained fury, his words resonating with an emotional intensity that Kazumi had never witnessed before. She could feel the tense energy radiating from him, as if he were on the verge of exploding. His words expressed the emotional exhaustion and frustration he felt. He could no longer keep those feelings buried deep within. Everything he had accumulated in his noble heart was reaching its limit. He was tired of the constant pressure to be strong and push through difficult situations. He could handle the hateful looks. They were annoying, but the expectations from those who believed in him were worse. They expected him to always be the good guy, or the hero, which was draining for him. He longed to free himself from those expectations and allow himself to feel more human, rather than carrying the constant responsibility of being the savior for those who viewed him as just another villager. The anger and pain in Naruto's eyes were palpable. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke, revealing the immense emotional burden he carried. He wanted to stop being the hero, to stop being the good one. He simply wanted to be himself, and his tone was desperate, as if those words were a secret confession he had never shared with anyone before. He had the right to express his anger and sadness without always having to maintain an appearance of strength. Kazumi whispered his name, now understanding that her teammate bore a tremendous weight on his shoulders. He insisted he didn't need her pity, stating that once he became a Chunin, he wouldn't be a burden to her anymore. It felt unfair to him that she and Sakura would become Chunin while he would likely remain a genin for life, and he accepted it. Kazumi was taken aback. Naruto was being pessimistic. The irony in his words struck Kazumi hard. He, who had always been so optimistic and determined, now seemed to have lost his spark. She couldn't believe he was saying such things. Naruto shrugged, trying to downplay his own words. He spoke with a resigned tone, as if he had surrendered to his fate. The cheerful, optimistic Naruto was now pessimistic. He was clearly struggling. Where was the boy who had once challenged her to prove he was stronger, the one who saw the positive side of life regardless of the situation? The person standing before her was not her rival, nor was he her teammate. He was not the Naruto she knew. Kazumi was taken aback by Naruto's words. She struggled to process what he had just said. Deep down, she had always considered Naruto her friend and rival, but her pride prevented her from admitting it. Now, she felt as if she had lost her rival. It didn't matter, she would demand to be his rival again. She knew Naruto well enough to believe he would revert to his old self once this phase was over. She convinced herself of that. Naruto's declaration hit Kazumi like a punch to the gut. She had been so certain that their rivalry would remain unchanged, so hearing him state that they were merely teammates felt like a personal betrayal. He turned and began moving toward the tower, declaring that reaching it was what mattered now. Kazumi managed to whisper her understanding, feeling as if she were leaving behind an important part of herself with each step she took behind Naruto. Moments later, Saku arrived, visibly concerned for her. Kazumi, feeling overwhelmed, brushed Saku's hand away, not in the mood for comfort. She insisted she was fine, but her tone was sharp. Saku hesitated, hurt by the rejection, and watched as Kazumi continued to follow Naruto, her expression serious and withdrawn. It was clear something had transpired between them. Meanwhile, Gulbranson Loki introduced herself, her name more masculine than feminine, but she cherished it. Her father had chosen it for her, believing she would be born a boy. When she wasn't, he expressed a hint of disappointment, but that feeling faded when he held her in his arms. It didn't matter whether she was a boy or a girl. What mattered was that she was with them, a gift from the gods. Anko, tying up the sound ninjas to extract information, commented on Loki's unusual surname. Loki defended her name, explaining that it was unique and derived from two powerful words. Anko, intrigued, pressed for the meaning, and Loki playfully responded, teasing Anko about her appearance. Anko took it in stride, confident in herself. Loki explained that her surname meant Sword of God, and then formally introduced herself as the Princess of the Frozen Lands. Anko, having encountered royalty before, was taken aback by the revelation. She knew of the Frozen Lands, isolated by the treacherous Black Sea. Now, she had more questions than answers and decided to focus on interrogating the sound ninjas before addressing Loki. In another part of the forest, Itachi and Shursui kept their distance from a majestic animal before them. Shursui joked about capturing it for Konoha, but Itachi dismissed the idea, insisting it belonged in the wild. Shursui, attempting to lighten the mood, made a comment about the animal's diet, but their banter was interrupted by a mysterious voice that seemed to come from nowhere. They searched for the source, but no one was in sight. The voice revealed that it had been watching them for some time and expressed surprise at meeting them in person. Shursui pointed out a shadow hovering above them, and they looked up to see a girl levitating, her pale skin and light blonde hair contrasting with the surroundings, accompanied by strange wings. She had blue eyes, and beneath them were markings that made it seem as though she never slept, along with pointed ears. Her lips were a shade of purple. She wore a navy blue dress and was barefoot. She apologized kindly and calmly, expressing that it was not her intention to frighten them. From her perspective, there was no reason to fight against the two ninjas from Konoha. The girl floated serenely before Itachi and Shursui, who kept their weapons ready while trying to understand who she was. She gently descended to the ground, her blue dress swaying as it touched the grass. A girl with short white hair and blue eyes confronted a boy with black hair wearing a straw hat, expressing her frustration at his actions. He responded with a stern tone, indicating that he was merely doing his job, as he always had to clean up the messes left by his teammates. A third person joined the conversation, a man with blonde hair and brown eyes, pointing out that he had blocked the boy's chakra, as well as his own to some extent. The boy retorted that he was just cleaning up the disaster they had caused. They remained on guard, alert to any movement from the strange girl. Both were elite ninjas, the best of the best, and they knew they could not let their guard down. This girl could be a latent danger, as appearances could be deceiving. They were prime examples of ninjas who graduated early from the ninja academy, both prodigies. Shursui whispered that he believed her wings were fake and that she was using some technique from the rock village. Itachi speculated that she might be using the earth element, ultra-light rock technique, a technique used by IWA ninjas to fly. Shursui and Itachi stayed vigilant, their senses heightened as they scrutinized every detail of the floating girl. As experienced ninjas, they understood that appearances could be misleading, and even a seemingly harmless creature could conceal great danger. The girl interrupted their thoughts, stating that she could hear their conversation and was not using any of the techniques they mentioned, nor was she under an illusion. Her wings were real, as she was born with them. She confidently remarked that their weapons would not work against her, as her skin was harder than diamond. She added that perhaps their eyes might work against her in some way, but not as effectively as they should. With a smile, she asked if they were familiar with the Sharingan. Shursui tightened his grip on his sword, his coal-black eyes fixed on the mysterious girl. She clarified that she was not referring to the ordinary Sharingan, which she deemed too weak to fight her, claiming she could blind them with a simple movement. She then mentioned the Manjikyu Sharingan, the evolution of the Sharingan achieved by witnessing the death of a loved one, smiling as she looked into the eyes of the two Uchiha. At that moment, they realized they needed to take her seriously. How did this girl know one of the clan's best-kept secrets? Few outside the Uchiha clan were aware of the evolution of the Sharingan, which was rare, with only a few Uchiha possessing it. She anticipated their thoughts, explaining that a friend had warned her about the dangers of the Manjikyu Sharingan and advised her to be cautious. Shursui furrowed his brow, intrigued by her revelation, and asked who this friend was, noting it was unusual for someone outside the Uchiha clan to possess such knowledge. Itachi remained silent, his eyes narrowed as he observed the girl with suspicion, his hand never straying far from his kunai, ready to act if necessary. The winged creature beside her shifted slightly, its feathers glinting in the light. The atmosphere was tense, filled with unasked questions. The girl reassured her creature, calming it with her aura as she explained that she had met Senju Tobirama, the second Hokage, but not in life. She had encountered him in the labyrinth of lost souls. Shursui raised an eyebrow, having never heard of such a place, while Itachi inquired about the labyrinth of lost souls, his voice grave as he maintained his watch over the mysterious girl and her creature. She described it as a purgatory for those who died unexpectedly or committed crimes against nature in life, such as bringing the dead back to life. The only way to enter was to have committed a crime against nature, died unexpectedly, or to be caught between life and death. Shursui and Itachi exchanged glances, processing the information she had just revealed. The concept of a place like the labyrinth of lost souls challenged their understanding, but the seriousness in her tone suggested she was not lying. Itachi frowned, still analyzing the girl with his activated Sharingan, questioning how she could have returned if her claims were true and why Senju Tobirama would be there. Shursui sheathed his sword, though he remained on high alert, pondering the crime against nature she might have committed to end up in such a place. Unless... The girl explained that in her first life, she had died unexpectedly. The Shinigami in charge had given her the chance to reincarnate in this world, and Senju Tobirama was there because he had created the summoning, Edo Tensei. She looked directly into Itachi's eyes as she spoke. The summoning, Edo Tensei, was a technique capable of reviving the dead. Now everything made sense. That was why Senju Tobirama was present. Itachi and Shursui exchanged glances, surprised by the revelation from the mysterious princess named Dawn. Shursui, his voice tinged with skepticism, remarked that it was absurd. Itachi observed Dawn with a neutral expression, though his mind raced to comprehend the complexity of her story. The existence of someone who had lived before, possessed unique abilities, and had connections with legendary figures like the second Hokage challenged his understanding of reality. Dawn calmly replied that whether it was absurd or not, it was the truth. As the future queen, she had the responsibility to protect her subjects, and the little creature beside her was one of them. She affectionately petted the winged creature. Itachi continued to regard Dawn with a neutral expression, showing no surprise at her words. He noted that Senju Tobirama had spoken to her about them, their eyes, and their clan, and he wondered what other secrets had been shared during her time in the labyrinth. Dawn changed the subject, mentioning that her little friend was a baby. She climbed onto the creature's back, looking at the Uchiha with an air of superiority. She introduced the creature as Griffin, explaining that it had found the person it had come to seek, although it had come without its father's permission. As Griffin began to flap its wings, it slowly lifted off the ground, and Dawn smiled, remaining perched on its back while looking sympathetically at the two Uchiha. Itachi and Shursui drew their weapons, prepared for a potential attack from the girl. Dawn called upon the wind, and as if by magic, the previously gentle breeze responded, rustling the branches of the trees. She commanded the wind to carry a message to the 5 nations and the entire shinobi continent. The wind roared in affirmation, and both Uchiha stood firm against the gust. Dawn joyfully proclaimed that soon, the one who sleeps would awaken from a long slumber, and they must prepare for his arrival. As Griffin took off at an astonishing speed, leaving a trail of dust behind, the strong wind gradually subsided, returning to a gentle breeze. The Uchiha exchanged thoughtful glances, contemplating the meaning of Dawn's words. Shursui questioned what she meant by the one who sleeps, his voice barely audible in the renewed silence. Itachi suggested they return to Konoha to report this event, sheathing his kunai as Shursui did the same with his sword. The echo of the mysterious voice, filled with power and wisdom, whispered in their ears, urging them to prepare for the awakening of the one who sleeps. Itachi noted the seriousness of the situation, and they resumed their journey to Konoha, now moving with greater urgency. It seemed the world was changing, and no one had noticed, not even the elemental nations. As they sped toward Konoha, their minds were occupied with the revelation of the ancient voice and Dawn's words. They knew they could not ignore the message, as a significant transformation loomed on the horizon. Shursui wondered aloud who the one who sleeps could be, perhaps a god, a legendary hero, or simply someone with powerful chakra. Itachi remained silent, but his expression suggested he had already formed some theories. In Konoha, at the Hyuga complex, Mikoto was startled by the whispered words, dropping her teacup and reaching for a kunai hidden in her sleeve. She realized she was not the only one who had heard that voice. Saori, her friend, confirmed with a glance that she too had heard it. The voice had been old and filled with power and wisdom, and Saori questioned her sanity. Mikoto reassured her that she was not crazy. She had also heard the voice, and it seemed they were not alone in this experience, as the servants of the Hyuga estate were also discussing it among themselves. Questions swirled in Mikoto's mind about what the voice meant by the one who would awaken from a long slumber. How was it possible that everyone had heard the same message? It could have been a special long-range technique, but she sensed no chakra in those words. It felt as if the wind had carried it of its own will. Throughout Konoha, the whispered message stirred unrest. The third Hokage, seated in his office, furrowed his brow at the words that had reached his ears. He summoned the Umbu, who appeared before him, already anticipating his question. When he asked if they had also heard the whisper, they nodded in confirmation. Hiruzen felt a sense of foreboding. Something significant was about to happen. This strange message, carried by the wind, had likely been heard by every inhabitant of the elemental nations, including the Kages of the other hidden villages. If the whispered words were true, the elemental nations were in danger. But the question was, what kind of danger? Who was the person that would awaken from their long slumber? Beyond the clouds, a young woman gently stroked the feathers of the griffin, expressing concern for the creature's well-being. The young griffin responded with a loud screech, as if apologizing for something. She reassured the creature that she would speak to its father to prevent any punishment, acknowledging its careful completion of a task. As the wind brushed against her face, her curiosity grew while she settled comfortably on the griffin's back. She knew the griffin had found Naruto, the sleeping god king. This was an achievement many of its kind had sought to bring to the Sakido Tairiku, the true home of their lord, the supreme god king. The griffin communicated that it had indeed found Naruto, who was still the same kind-hearted person she remembered. The first time she had met him was in the Labyrinth of Lost Souls, where he had arrived after drinking something given to him by a stranger on the street. He had been just a child, easily influenced, yearning for love and willing to pay any price for it. She had also been a child when she arrived there. The griffin continued, expressing concern over Naruto's current state, revealing that his eyes reflected sadness, anger, desperation, and inner conflict. This was troubling news. They needed to reach the palace in the sky, located on the floating island of Eternal Spring. She urged the griffin to fly quickly to the palace, where she hoped to find what she needed to help her beloved king. In the Chunin exam, within the Forest of Death in Konoha, Kazumi heard a whisper in the wind that sent shivers down her spine. The voice conveyed power and wisdom, but another voice she heard was cruel and filled with a terrifying, volatile energy. It seemed she was the only one able to hear this new voice, which urged her to communicate through her thoughts. She questioned the voice, asking who it was. The response was chilling, claiming to be an ancient rival of the wind, but inviting her to call it master. Kazumi remained silent for a moment, contemplating the implications of this encounter. She asserted that she already had a master, Kakashi, who taught her well enough. The voice insisted that her current teacher was limiting her potential and offered to awaken the power lying dormant within her. Kazumi pondered whether she truly had untapped power inside her as she observed Naruto's back. She asked how she could awaken this power and whether the voice was real or merely a figment of her imagination. The voice assured her of its reality and promised to wait patiently for her response, reminding her that Naruto was snapping his fingers in front of her. Suddenly, she was jolted back to reality, swatting Naruto's hand away from her face. He winced in pain as warm drops fell onto his skin. He commented on her use of a kunai, which had inadvertently cut his thumb. Realizing her mistake, Kazumi apologized, feeling guilty for the deep cut she had caused. Naruto reassured her that it wasn't her fault, taking responsibility for not acting sooner to prevent the incident. Kazumi insisted that it was indeed her fault, approaching him to help tie a cloth around his thumb. Naruto, not wanting to argue, simply smiled at her, and she felt comforted by the familiar warmth of his presence. However, Saku, feeling a pang of jealousy, cleared his throat to interrupt them, reminding them that they were close to the tower. Kazumi managed to restrain herself from lashing out at Saku, and Naruto agreed to move on, appearing to return to his usual self. Meanwhile, Kuragami expressed disbelief at his companion's decision to involve himself in the affairs of the human world, particularly with the reincarnation of Indra Otsutsuki. He understood the danger posed by the Uzumaki boy but felt that using the girl as a pawn would complicate matters further. Kuragami was willing to take the risk, focusing intently on a well where many souls resided, particularly one he needed to extract. With that soul, the girl would serve as a counterbalance to the Uzumaki boy, a precarious strategy to harness the power of two superpowers. Kuragami felt a sense of urgency. The boy was dangerous, a ticking time bomb that could explode at any moment. Yumiko shook her head at what her companion was about to do. Out of all the souls in the well, he had to choose Uchiha Madara's. Kuragami reached into the well, pulling out the soul that was meant to be Uchiha Madara. He hesitated, recognizing the soul. Yumiko laughed at the situation. Kuragami's voice turned cold as he asked where Madara's brother, Izuna, was. Izuna responded that his brother had already been taken by Shinigami-sama. Enraged, Kuragami forcefully threw Izuna's soul back into the well, muttering about Yato being responsible for Madara's disappearance. Just then, a voice interrupted him. It was Tenko, the second in the hierarchy of the Shinigamis and king of the Labyrinth of Lost Souls. Kuragami was taken aback, He had never had a good relationship with Tenko, whose gray hair and dark eyes were as piercing as the night. Tenko approached them, explaining that Madara Uchiha was a potential danger in the mortal world. He reminded Kuragami that they could not intervene directly in human affairs but could do so through others. Kuragami protested, asserting that he had no right to take Madara from his well of condemned souls. Tenko merely smiled at his words, reminding Kuragami that Madara was condemned to the labyrinth of lost souls and that he had only taken him to where he belonged. Kuragami stood firm, feeling his anger rise with each word from Tenko. He insisted that he was also a Shinigami and had rights over the souls of mortals. Tenko laughed coldly, questioning Kuragami's belief that the labyrinth was part of his jurisdiction. Kuragami felt his pride hit him like a punch to the gut but tried to remain calm. He insisted that he deserved respect as a fellow Shinigami. Tenko's oppressive presence loomed over him, making the air feel dense and heavy. Kuragami attempted to justify himself, saying he had changed and learned from his past mistakes, but his voice faltered under Tenko's fury. Tenko interrupted him, mocking his claims of redemption and accusing him of being the same old thief. Yumiko, who had been observing silently, struggled to comprehend the tension between the two Shinigamis. She had known of Tenko from a distance but had never been so close to him. She finally gathered the courage to ask why Tenko was angry with Kuragami. Tenko explained that Kuragami had always been a problem since his birth, driven by greed and a tendency to steal souls that belonged to other Shinigamis. He recounted how Kuragami had even attempted to take souls from Tenko's own domain, emphasizing the chaos Kuragami's ambition had caused over the centuries. Yumiko listened, feeling sympathy for Kuragami despite Tenko's harsh words. She had seen Kuragami work hard and wondered if he had matured. She hesitated before suggesting that perhaps Kuragami had changed. Tenko admitted that Kuragami might have changed but insisted that just because he hadn't committed any blatant crimes in recent centuries didn't mean his fundamental nature had altered. He warned that greed was a poison that would eventually resurface. Kuragami absorbed Tenko's accusations in silence, his heart heavy with the truth behind them. He finally spoke, acknowledging his past but assuring Tenko that he had not repeated his mistakes. He learned to value souls and respect the domains of others, and to not interfere in matters that did not concern him. Tenko observed him with critical eyes, as if evaluating every word that left his mouth. He remarked that, as far as he could see, Kuragami still viewed the world through the lens of his own greed and ambition. He expressed that one could not simply change their nature, no matter how many times they repeated it to themselves. That was the truth Kuragami had to face, his brother. Kuragami tensed at Tenko's words, feeling anger boiling within him. Tenko pointed out an example, mentioning Kuragami's intention to use one of Indra Otsutsuki's transmigrants, comparing it to the failed Otsutsuki experiments of evolution. Kuragami murmured that he only wanted to use Madara to train the next transmigration of Indra, lowering his gaze. Tenko laughed again, a rough and humorless sound, questioning Kuragami's intentions of training a transmigrant of Indra. He wondered if Kuragami aimed for her to become a superpower in the mortal world. He reminded Kuragami that the Well of Souls was not his to control, as it served as a temporary prison until it was determined where each soul should go. With that, Tenko vanished. Meanwhile, Saku, Kazumi, and Naruto arrived at the tower, finding it empty inside. Saku noted the absence of anyone, while Naruto suggested burning the place down as he sat on the cold floor, closing his eyes for a moment. He opened them again upon hearing Saku's voice, who pointed out a sign that read, "If you do not possess the sky, acquire the knowledge that represents it. If you do not possess the earth, you will run far in search of strength. If you have the scrolls of heaven and earth, the paths of dangerous will become secure. It is the secret of a Chunin. You will be part of the elite that guides others." Naruto recognized it as a riddle and noted the blank space. Kazumi, confident in her deduction, stated that the answers were the scrolls. She pulled them out, asserting that she was never wrong. Naruto responded with enthusiasm, prompting Kazumi to express her annoyance at his comment. She handed him the scroll of heaven, and he chuckled at her irritation, enjoying the last moments of their rivalry. They agreed to open the scrolls together, As they counted to 3, both scrolls opened simultaneously, revealing a summoning seal. Smoke began to rise from the scrolls as they tossed them forward. A figure emerged from the haze, and the team remained on guard. Once the smoke cleared, a familiar person appeared, recognizable by their height, facial scar, and tone of voice. Naruto smiled at the sight of his favorite teacher, who treated him like a student without favoritism. Iruka greeted them warmly, expressing how long it had been since they last met. Saku asked what he was doing there, and Naruto felt a sense of comfort in seeing a constant presence in his life. Iruka explained that Chunin-ranked ninjas were to welcome those who had passed the second exam, but he was also there as a messenger. He congratulated them on successfully completing the second phase with plenty of time to spare. Naruto, lying on the cold floor, remarked that it was another stripe on the tiger, enjoying the strange and relaxing sensation of the cold ground. Iruka observed this change in his student, feeling a mix of joy and sadness at how Naruto was growing up without him being a part of it. Saku expressed disbelief at the news of having completed the test, unsure if Iruka was joking. Iruka confirmed their progress with pride, noting they were among the last to arrive at the central building. Saku was surprised, having thought they would be the last and possibly disqualified due to time. Iruka praised their performance, affirming they had proven themselves as true ninjas. Naruto, still lying on the floor, inquired about what would happen next, having accomplished his main goal of passing the second stage and now awaiting further instructions. Saku excitedly celebrated their success, but Kazumi reminded them that the third test was still ahead. Curious, Naruto asked Iruka about the third test, but Iruka informed them that they would have to wait for the other teams to arrive for official information. He warned them that the upcoming test would be more challenging and advised them to take care, especially Naruto, who he expressed concern for. Naruto interrupted, asserting that Iruka need not worry about him, as he had become a ninja of the village of Konoha the moment he received his ninja headband. Iruka acknowledged Naruto's growth, apologizing for his concern. Naruto reassured him that he was strong enough to take care of himself and face the world head-on. Iruka then decided to leave for a moment to fetch them something to eat and drink, promising to return soon. Hiruzen observed Anko, the former student of Orochimaru, as she rubbed her shoulder where the cursed seal lingered. He hadn't expected her to return to the village so soon, but with the Chunin exams drawing attention from across the continent, it was a plausible scenario. This event was the most anticipated occasion, where money flowed freely and information about ninjas from other villages was gathered. Anko's expression hardened at Hiruzen's question. With a resigned sigh, she withdrew her hand from her shoulder, concealing the persistent pain of the cursed seal behind a stoic facade. She stated that she was fine and could handle it, avoiding eye contact. Hiruzen frowned slightly at her evasive response, sensing the deeper struggles hidden beneath her tough exterior. As Anko enjoyed a dango, Loki stood silently behind her while Anko shared what she had discovered about her traitorous master's plans. Hiruzen shifted the topic, asking about the girl who appeared to be around Naruto's age. Anko introduced her as Loki Gulbranson, the heir princess of the Frozen Lands. Hiruzen raised an eyebrow at the mention of a princess in Konoha, especially one from a place so isolated by treacherous seas. Intrigued by Loki's royal title, Hiruzen expressed his interest, noting how unusual it was for a princess from the Frozen Lands to be in Konoha. He greeted her respectfully, introducing himself as the third Hokage and welcoming her to the village. Loki responded with a warm smile, indicating that the pleasure was hers. Hiruzen inquired about her purpose in Konoha and the whereabouts of her escort. Loki elegantly accepted the invitation to sit and explained that her visit was primarily for diplomatic and commercial reasons, as the Frozen Lands sought to establish trade relations with various nations on the elemental continent. She added that she had escaped from her escort, who were too rigid, and assured Hiruzen that she had adequate security measures in place. Hiruzen questioned whether she was too young for such an important mission, wanting to understand why a girl of her age had been entrusted with such responsibilities. He also asked what she was doing in the Forest of Death. Loki smiled calmly, explaining that her father, the king of the Frozen Lands, trusted her abilities in handling diplomatic matters. She had been trained in foreign and domestic politics, economics, and trade from a young age. Regarding her presence in the Forest of Death, she simply stated that she was exploring, as she had an adventurous spirit. Hiruzen nodded, recognizing a certain resemblance in her personality to a certain orange-clad ninja. He expressed his relief that she was well protected and prepared for her mission, offering assistance during her stay in Konoha. Loki appreciated the offer, stating that she did not believe she would need help at that moment but would not hesitate to ask if a situation arose. Hiruzen stood to take his leave, indicating that he had other matters to attend to and would speak with her again later. As he exited the room, Anko turned to Loki with a mischievous smile, teasing her about being a real princess and how it explained her elegance and sophistication despite her playful demeanor. She leaned closer and whispered, curious about what truly brought Loki to Konoha. Loki acknowledged that her diplomatic mission was essential, but she also had personal reasons for visiting, such as the opportunity to meet the legendary ninjas of the village and learn from their skills and strategies. She mentioned a small personal matter that had drawn her to Konoha. Anko complimented Hiruzen, expressing her gladness at having met him. Anko then asked how Loki had managed to escape from her escort, warning her about the dangers of wandering alone in Konoha. Loki shrugged lightly, explaining that it had been easy to mislead them and that her skills surpassed those of her escort. Anko chuckled softly but then grew serious, cautioning her that not everyone in Konoha was friendly. Loki nodded, understanding the need for caution and appreciating Anko's concern for her safety. She expressed her gratitude and then Anko proposed a tour of the village, offering to show her some interesting places. Loki happily accepted, eager to learn more about Konoha and its inhabitants. Meanwhile, Naruto's night had been relatively normal, though he found it less than ideal to share a room with Sakura. He had nothing against his teammate, but he would have preferred not to be in the same space. Today marked the final day for other teams to reach the tower and begin the next phase of the Chunin exams. As he curled up in bed, his thoughts drifted toward the future and the challenges that awaited him. Suddenly, he heard a whisper behind him. A soft, feminine voice asked if he was awake. Naruto turned to see a girl sitting in the darkness, her expression serene. She resembled Kazumi slightly, but her eyes were emerald green, unlike Kazumi's dark ones. He was surprised and curious, asking who she was and what she was doing there while reaching for a kunai hidden under his pillow. The girl smiled mischievously before responding that her name was Loki and that she had come to see him because he had forgotten about her. Naruto raised an eyebrow, not recognizing the name or the girl who had snuck into his room. He expressed his confusion, still keeping his kunai at the ready. Loki chuckled softly, her laughter musical and gentle, like the sound of a soft bell. She claimed to know much about him, his courage, determination, weaknesses, goals, and dreams. Naruto was taken aback by her knowledge and demanded to know how she knew all this and who had sent her. Loki responded playfully, saying she was his future wife and it was her duty to know everything about her future husband. Naruto was stunned by this declaration. The idea of a future wife was the last thing he expected to hear. He tried to process the information, but his mind went blank. He stammered in disbelief, insisting that he was too young for such things. Loki countered with a statement about age and responsibilities, which left Naruto momentarily speechless. He admitted that while it was technically true, he was still the only one among his peers who had not experienced those things. The thought of having a fiancé, especially one as strange as Loki, bewildered him. Loki continued, unfazed by his incredulity, explaining that her father, the king of the frozen lands, had important plans for their kingdoms, and her marriage to him was a key part of those plans. Naruto, however, firmly stated that he was not interested in marrying anyone, especially someone who invaded his room without permission. He asked her to leave, not wanting any trouble. Loki laughed again, a musical sound that seemed endless. When she finally stopped, her expression turned serious. She told him he could not avoid her so easily. In a puff of smoke, she disappeared and reappeared in front of him, disarming him and pinning him down on the bed. Loki leaned closer, her face just inches from his, her green eyes shining in the dim light. She declared her love for him, and then she kissed him deeply. Naruto tried to resist, but Loki was surprisingly strong for her size, holding him down as the kiss continued. After a few moments, she pulled away, leaving him breathless. She reassured him that this was just the beginning of their romance, and Naruto felt a blush creeping onto his cheeks, realizing he had enjoyed the kiss. Loki stood up, satisfied with his flustered expression, and said goodbye before vanishing in a swirl of green smoke. After a moment of silence, Naruto found his voice, admitting to himself that the encounter had been intense, still feeling the warmth of her lips. He spent the rest of the night awake, trying to shake off the bewilderment caused by the girl with green eyes. To distract himself, he did exercises until dawn, when the first rays of sunlight filtered into his room. As the morning light illuminated his sweaty, exhausted face, he heard the cheerful chirping of birds outside. With a long, loud yawn, Naruto sat up against the wall, his sore muscles protesting from the intense workout, but his mind was still occupied with thoughts of the mysterious girl. He wondered who she was and how she had stolen his second kiss, the first being an accident with a teammate. Just thinking about it made him frustrated. While he sat in silence, trying to process the events of the previous night, the door to his room opened slowly. Sakura Haruno, his teammate, entered. She asked if he hadn't been taught to knock before entering. Sakura, slightly annoyed, explained that she had been knocking for 2 long minutes. When Naruto didn't respond, she felt compelled to check on him. Apologizing, Naruto relaxed his tense posture, acknowledging that he was still half asleep and exhausted from the night's events. In an unusual situation, Saku crossed her arms over her chest, wrinkling her nose at the unpleasant odor emanating from Naruto. He smelled like sulfur and vinegar. She suggested that he take a shower, stating he smelled worse than the trash bin at the academy. As Saku covered her nose with one hand, she left the room, unable to endure the scent any longer. Naruto, oblivious to the extent of his odor, mumbled to himself about not smelling that bad. Saku's voice echoed from the hallway, urging him to wash up quickly since the third stage of the exams was about to begin. With a grunt, Naruto stood up, feeling the tension leave his muscles as he headed toward the bathroom. He acknowledged her with a casual response, assuring her he would join her soon. Once inside the bathroom, Naruto closed the door behind him. The cold shower jolted him awake and washed away the sticky layer of sweat from the previous night. As he scrubbed his hair and body, he scolded himself for allowing a girl to distract him so much. After finishing his shower, Naruto emerged with a towel wrapped around his waist, drying his hair with another towel. He glanced at his reflection in the mirror, rubbing his tired eyes. The name of the mysterious girl from last night, Loki, slipped from his lips as he dried off and changed into fresh clothes. Determined to push thoughts of Loki aside, Naruto left his room. However, the image of her green eyes, her smile, and that kiss lingered in his mind. He descended the stairs to an improvised dining area, where he found his teammates having breakfast. Saku was trying to ask Kazumi out, who was ignoring his pleas. Naruto sighed at the scene. Thanks to them, they were the center of attention among the other teams. He advised Saku to give up, reminding him that Kazumi already had a boyfriend. Saku dismissed Naruto's words, convinced that Kazumi couldn't possibly be taken. Frustrated, Saku insisted that Naruto needed to come up with a better excuse to keep him away from her. Naruto continued sipping his tea, uninterested in Saku's stubbornness. If Saku wanted to remain trapped in his fantasy, Naruto would let him be. Kazumi, irritated by Saku's constant chatter, swatted him away, wishing to avoid a ruined day due to his presence. Saku murmured her name in response to the abrupt gesture. Naruto chuckled, suggesting that Saku should accept the reality of the situation and leave Kazumi alone. Saku's face flushed with anger and embarrassment at Naruto's words. He couldn't understand why everyone seemed to be against him when he was only trying to help. In a fit of frustration, he slammed his hand on the table and called Naruto foolish for speaking without thinking. Naruto accepted the label, preferring to be seen as foolish rather than a nuisance like Saku. He took another sip of his tea, choosing not to engage in an argument at that moment. Kazumi remained silent, lost in her own thoughts. As the morning progressed, Kazumi's mind wandered to a conversation with a spirit of lightning. She had woken up in a comfortable bed after spending 2 nights on the cold forest floor. The spirit explained that it was the rival of the wind spirit and that the voice she had heard was that of a fairy princess named Dawn, who sought to awaken a sleeping god. Kazumi raised an eyebrow at the mention of a sleeping god, skeptical of the spirit's claims. The spirit asked if she had heard of Sakido Tairiku, the isolated continent shrouded in mist year-round. Kazumi recalled learning about it in her third-year geography class at the Ninja Academy. The spirit confirmed that Dawn would ascend to the throne once she found and awakened the sleeping god. Kazumi's curiosity piqued. She inquired about the god's power. The spirit remained silent for a moment before describing the god as extraordinarily powerful, capable of bending elemental spirits to its will and altering the natural order. Kazumi sighed, trying to piece together the information. A sleeping god, a fairy princess, and an elemental spirit were all part of a tale that felt too fantastical. She wanted to ask more about the other races inhabiting Sakido Tairiku but was interrupted by Saku, who had come to disturb her thoughts. Annoyed, Kazumi questioned why he always had to bother her. Saku suggested they talk about their relationship, but Kazumi looked at him disdainfully, uninterested. She had no romantic feelings for him, especially since she already had a boyfriend. With no further interest in the conversation, she dismissed Saku, focusing instead on her own thoughts and the mysteries surrounding the spirit's tale. Kazumi told Saku to leave her alone as she picked up a cup of tea and began to sip it slowly. Saku watched her with a cold expression, contemplating the possibility that there might be something more between them, something she had not yet considered. He fidgeted with his fingers, trying to find the right words. Kazumi set her cup down on the table with a sharp motion, causing a little liquid to spill. She stated firmly that she had no time or interest in romantic games and urged him to focus on his training and improving his skills instead of wasting time trying to win her over, adding that she already had a boyfriend. She looked him in the eye, expressing that if he could not respect her decisions and priorities, he should keep his distance. She cared little for his feelings and only wanted him to be a competent teammate. With that, she turned her attention back to her tea, signaling the end of their conversation. Saku felt his heart shatter at her words, realizing the painful truth that she was already taken. Naruto had been right. From the sidelines, Naruto observed the scene without intervening, unable to suppress a smile. It was satisfying to see Saku confront the harsh reality. He took another sip of tea, relishing the flavor and the calm it brought him. A few minutes later, Kazumi finished her tea and headed for the exit, stating that she was going to train and did not want to waste any more time there. She crossed the threshold without looking back, leaving Saku frozen in place, unsure of what to do as he watched her walk away. Naruto shrugged and stood up, also ready to step outside and relax a bit. He joked that he hoped Saku had a good day dealing with his romantic disappointment as he left the dining hall without waiting for a response. As he walked, his thoughts returned to Loki, the mysterious girl from the previous night. On his way outside, Naruto paused briefly in the hallway, sitting on one of the stone benches. He took a deep breath of the fresh air, trying to clear his mind of the persistent thoughts about Loki. But it didn't work. The image of her bright green eyes, that alluring smile, and the taste of her lips lingered. He sighed, running a hand through his damp hair, questioning what was happening to him. He couldn't stop thinking about her. He reassured himself that it was ridiculous to think he was in love. He was merely intrigued. After all, he barely knew her, yet something deep inside him suggested otherwise. In the preliminary rounds, the Hokage congratulated all the teams that had completed the test in the combat arena of the tower. Standing before them, he was accompanied by the Jounin sensei of the teams that had survived the Forest of Death. Initially, there had been 78 participants, but only 21 remained. Kakashi's gaze was fixed on his student, noting that Kazumi seemed normal despite having been bitten by Orochimaru and bearing a curse mark. She appeared fresh, with her usual frown, but he noticed that his pink-haired student looked downcast. What truly caught his attention was Naruto, who wore a neutral expression, devoid of his usual mischievous vibe. Kakashi, distracted by his observations, asked Guy if he had been speaking to him. Guy, annoyed by the interruption, turned away, feeling slighted. The Hokage addressed the genin, congratulating those who had passed the second exam and clarifying several points before moving on to the third exam. He explained that the Chunin exams were a competition, as they had been in previous years, pitting genin from each nation against one another to showcase their village's strength without resorting to war. He looked seriously at the approved candidates before continuing. He emphasized that the exams also served as a war simulation between the countries, surprising many genin. Naruto wondered if they were naive. The history of the elemental nations was filled with wars and conflicts since the founding of the shinobi villages. Before the village wars, there had been clan wars, and once those ceased, the great wars between nations emerged with the formation of the various shinobi villages. To prevent unnecessary loss of life, a specific method was chosen to measure each village's strength, leading to the creation of the Chunin exams, the ninja promotion test. The Hokage explained that the exams were a way to assess their abilities as ninjas and also served as propaganda, being observed by many, including potential clients and feudal lords from all elemental nations. It was not necessary to win the tournament to be promoted to Chunin, demonstrating the skills that qualified them for promotion was all that was needed. Just as he was about to continue, he was interrupted by a sickly-looking ninja who frequently coughed and knelt before him. The ninja requested to take over from there, and the Hokage nodded in agreement. He introduced himself as Heiate Gecko, the supervisor for the third test of the Chunin exams. He explained that due to the high number of passers, there would be preliminary matches, with only 10 advancing to the final round. 16 would not make it to the finals, prompting complaints from the crowd. One of Kabuto's teammates asked if they could rest since they had just arrived 2 hours ago. Heiate replied that it was unfortunate they were tired, but rules were rules. He informed them that the duels would be one-on-one, and anyone unwilling to participate could opt out without affecting their team, as they would now compete individually. Only one hand was raised among the crowd, belonging to Kabuto, who had participated in the Chunin exams 5 times and had withdrawn on several occasions. Heiate thanked Kabuto for his participation as he left the arena, exchanging glances with his companions, who nodded in acknowledgement. Now that the matter was settled, Heiate directed the genin's attention to the monitor on their right, and they complied. The names of each participant had been entered, and 2 names would randomly appear on the screen, indicating which 2 individuals would face each other. Heiate announced this while clearing his throat. He explained that once the battle began, there were only 3 possible outcomes: voluntary surrender, the defeat of one of the combatants, or his determination of the winner. He then instructed the start of the drawing, and the monitor displayed names at a dizzying speed until it abruptly stopped, revealing the combatants. Uzumaki Naruto was set to face Hyuga Hinata. Naruto remained calm at the outcome. He felt no fear about facing Hinata. In fact, he was somewhat pleased that his opponent was her. Heiate instructed both genin to prepare for battle. Naruto nodded, while Hinata crossed her arms, displaying a serious expression. He then directed all the other genin to leave the arena and move to the surrounding platforms. Following his instructions, the remaining genin exited the combat area and gathered with their Jounin sensei, who congratulated them for passing the second exam of the Chunin exams. Only Naruto, Hinata, and Heiate remained in the arena. Naruto had no issues with Hinata's boyfriend, but he had noticed the disdainful glances directed at him from the blind one, as he often referred to him, despite knowing those eyes could see through almost anything. Hinata was ready to confront the blonde, knowing that her clan specialized in close combat, while Naruto lacked a defined fighting style. However, she was aware that in a long-range battle, Naruto would have the advantage. She had heard from her girlfriend that although Naruto was foolish in many respects, he excelled in strategy. In close combat, she believed she would win. She needed to close the distance as soon as the battle began and finish it with the gentle fist technique. Naruto understood he was at a disadvantage. He couldn't access his chakra, and the small protrusions that suppressed the cursed seal were beginning to fade. Heiate cleared his throat, his gaze shifting between the two before announcing the start of the match. He spoke with a calm authority that captured the attention of everyone present. He stated that there were no rules in this fight. Participants would battle until one was defeated or chose to surrender. He also mentioned that he could end the match at any time without restriction and that there was no time limit. When he gave the signal, the combat would commence. Kakashi set aside thoughts of his students' match against the Hyuga during the preliminaries of the second stage of the Chunin exams. He knew Naruto had little chance of defeating a member of that clan, especially one regarded as the Rookie of the Year. His student lacked a defined fighting style. If anything, it was more street fighting and improvised. Kakashi felt partially responsible for this. He realized that Naruto's defeat was inevitable, but he needed to focus on the cursed seal affecting his other student. He understood well how such seals impacted their bearers. A clear example was Anko, a former student of Orochimaru. However, Kazumi showed no signs of being affected by her seal. There was no grimace of pain on her face, nor did she appear to be sweating. Kakashi approached her and greeted her with his characteristic smile, the one he could manage with his only visible eye. He hadn't noticed Saku until he saw him slumped in a corner. Kazumi responded to Kakashi's greeting without taking her eyes off the combat arena, maintaining her usual cold demeanor. Saku, on the other hand, did not return the greeting. A familiar female voice called out to him from behind. It was Kurenai Yuhi. The teacher of Team Kakashi acknowledged her without turning around, knowing she was likely there to boast about Hinata's assured victory over Naruto. Kurenai stood beside him, a small smile on her face as she remarked on whether he was ready to see his student lose to the Rookie of the Year. Kakashi sighed lightly at her words, responding that being the Rookie of the Year did not guarantee anything. He believed Hinata would take some hits from Naruto before ultimately winning. Kurenai insisted that Naruto had no chance against Hinata, stating the obvious fact that the blonde was not a match for someone of Hinata's caliber. Kakashi raised an eyebrow at this declaration, glancing at his student, who was gripping the railing tightly, likely upset by the implication that her boyfriend would lose to Naruto. He had known for some time that his student was dating the Hyuga, and he suspected that Saku had found out, which was why he seemed downcast. He would talk to him later. A moment later, Kazumi's gaze was not fixed on Hinata but rather on Naruto. Heiei raised his hand, asking if they were ready. The tension in the arena became palpable, with several genin leaning forward on the platforms, eager not to miss a moment of the confrontation. The air was thick with anticipation as Heiei abruptly lowered his hand and shouted for them to begin. With that command, Hinata made the first move, activating her Byakugan. The veins around her eyes swelled and became visible. She moved lightly and swiftly, almost like a whisper across the sand, stopping several steps from her target. Her hands quickly positioned themselves into the gentle fist stance before she exclaimed in surprise at the sight of Naruto's chakra, which was an unusual violet color. She was well aware that the blonde's chakra was typically blue. Naruto was aware of the vast reserves of chakra within the Uzumaki clan, but at that moment, those reserves were still, and the only chakra circulating through Naruto's network was a dark purple energy emanating from his neck. Hinata's words caught the attention of everyone present. A twisted smile appeared on Naruto's lips as he acknowledged the source of the chakra. Hinata's Byakugan was fixed on his neck. The cursed seal began to spread from his neck like a liquid shadow over Naruto's skin, forming dark spirals that pulsed like a heartbeat. Hinata did not look away. No one did. Kakashi frowned beneath his mask, his visible eye narrowing as he assessed the unexpected situation unfolding before him. The twisted smile on Naruto's face did not sit well with him. Kazumi, with her Sharingan activated, kept her gaze locked on Naruto. The chakra within him began to seep out, escaping slowly like a toxic mist that did not belong to him. This chakra radiated pure malice. Kakashi asked Kazumi what had happened in the Forest of Death, his eyes never leaving Naruto. She was supposed to be the one carrying the cursed seal of heaven, not him. Initial reports indicated that Kazumi was the victim, not Naruto. Naruto's mind was clouded, but one thought remained clear: he could not defeat Hinata in a close-range confrontation. His gaze shifted to the railings of the platforms where the genin were positioned. If he could use them, they could become an excellent long-range weapon. The chakra from the cursed seal infiltrated his chakra network frantically, like an uncontrollable current. Orochimaru's voice whispered persistently in his ears, a bothersome presence. He had to drown out that voice with his own thoughts, focusing on something simple and comforting: ramen. but the seal was affecting him. With incredible speed, barely perceptible to the ordinary genin, Naruto ran along the walls of the stadium and ripped one of the railings from the platforms. In his hands, it transformed into an improvised spear 7 meters long. With his makeshift spear, he began to move in Hinata's direction, who barely managed to dodge or deflect them with her gentle fist technique. She struggled to keep up with Naruto's erratic movements. With great effort, she redirected the moves aimed at her, fortunately avoiding any vital points. Sweat beaded on Hinata's forehead as she retreated, her pearl-like eyes desperately focused on every erratic movement of Naruto. The moves of the metal rod, now a spear, whistled past her face, stirring the air and kicking up dust with each strike. Naruto's voice, distorted by the influence of the cursed seal, echoed with an unprecedented ferocity that sent chills down her spine as he warned her to move or face the consequences. His smile widened, revealing sharp teeth, and his once blue eyes now glowed with a menacing red. The dark purple chakra visibly pulsed around him, writhing like a mass of twisted worms. Hinata attempted a move with her gentle fist, but Naruto intercepted it with the spear, forcing her to retreat. He swung the spear in a sweeping motion. Hinata jumped back gracefully, but the shockwave from the strike raised a cloud of dust that obscured Naruto. However, he could still see her thanks to his Byakugan. He taunted her, questioning if that was all she had as a top rookie. Hinata remained silent, concentrating all her energy on dodging the improvised spear. Her Byakugan allowed her to see the erratic flow of Naruto's chakra, now pulsing with a malignant and almost unpredictable intensity, like the chaotic beats of a deranged heart. Naruto's voice grew even rougher, devoid of any trace of his usual playfulness as he challenged her to prove herself. He leaped forward, raising the spear above his head, aiming for her upper body. Hinata unleashed a burst of compressed chakra from her palm, impacting the spear and deflecting it slightly. The blow did not stop Naruto, but it caused him to stagger for a moment, giving Hinata the crucial distance she needed. The burst of chakra barely made Naruto stumble back a few steps, the spear scraping the ground with a harsh sound. His red eyes narrowed in the dust. A furious smile spread across his marked face, and a low, reptilian laugh escaped his throat, tinged with cruelty. He praised Hinata for her effort but dismissed it as pathetic, swinging the spear with inhuman strength that sliced through the air. To him, the weight of the spear felt like a twig. He proclaimed that he would show her what true power was, belittling her gentle fist technique. With a wild move, Naruto charged again, this time with wider and more powerful strikes, forcing Hinata to jump back, cold sweat trickling down her back. The spear grazed her face, the wind from its speed nearly tousling her hair, and the impact against the cement floor echoed like thunder. Hinata prepared herself, readying her palms. Naruto spun the spear and moved it toward her abdomen. The metal rod sliced through the air once more, aimed directly at Hinata. Her Byakugan detected the trajectory with pinpoint accuracy. A quick twist of her body allowed her to narrowly evade the strike, feeling the cold metal brush against her clothing. The spear embedded itself in the stadium floor, sending up a cloud of dust. Naruto, excited, yanked the spear from the ground with a loud, jarring sound. His manic smile widened further, and the marks of the cursed seal on his face pulsed with a dark purple light. He dismissed her evasion as boring, swinging the spear as if it were weightless. The improvised weapon arced through the air with a threatening hum before being hurled at Hinata with astonishing speed, aimed directly at her head. Hinata rolled to the side just in time as the spear struck the stadium wall with a thunderous force, creating a noticeable crack. Debris fell, raising a thick cloud of dust. Naruto did not hesitate. He lunged forward, raising the metal pole with his shoulder. The pole sliced through the air for the third time, almost invisible, propelled by Naruto's raw strength. Hinata ducked just in time, feeling the icy breeze of the 7-meter-long object pass over her head. The impact against the stadium wall was tremendous, tearing away an entire block of concrete that disintegrated into a cloud of dust and debris. Without giving Hinata a moment to breathe, Naruto drove the pole into the wall and used it as leverage to propel himself forward, leaving a deep mark in the concrete. He launched himself at the Hyuga with a powerful kick aimed at her hands, clearly intending to incapacitate her. The kick, charged with terrifying force, hurtled toward Hinata's hands at lightning speed. The Hyuga reacted with the swiftness of a flash, crossing her forearms just in time to block the attack. A dull thud echoed in the stadium as the force of the impact pushed her back a couple of meters, leaving red marks on her skin through the fabric of her uniform. Without pausing, Naruto pivoted on his heel, propelled by a surge of dark purple chakra, and charged at Hinata again, his body becoming a blur. He appeared before her and executed a heel kick, sweeping Hinata's leg. Hinata jumped back, placing her hands on the ground and returning to a combat stance of the gentle fist. With the pole out of play, Naruto, influenced by the seal, unleashed a flurry of direct strikes, his fists and kicks whistling through the air. Each blow was charged with a malevolence that aimed unreservedly at Hinata's hands. The Hyuga, with the agility granted by her training and Byakugan, moved like a ghost, her gentle fist defenses deflecting each strike with pinpoint precision. Naruto threw a right hook, which Hinata blocked with an open palm, redirecting the force with a gentle push. Kicks flew one after another, targeting her forearms and wrists. Hinata spun gracefully, her feet barely grazing the ground as she dodged, her body a fluid dance that kept her a step ahead of Naruto's ferocity. In an instant, when Naruto overextended with a punch, Hinata seized the opportunity for a subtle counter. With a barely audible murmur, she executed a technique, sending an invisible burst of chakra to strike Naruto's side. The Jinchuriki staggered, his furious expression unchanged, but the impact momentarily threw him off balance. He quickly regained his footing, his red eyes fixed on Hinata. With a roar, Naruto charged again, delivering a circular kick aimed at Hinata's head to end the fight once and for all. Naruto's circular kick was unleashed with almost animalistic ferocity, a dark blur aimed at Hinata's temple. However, Hinata's Byakugan, with its 360-degree vision, had already traced the trajectory. With a barely perceptible tilt of her head, she allowed Naruto's foot to graze past her ear, the wind from the strike whistling against her skin. Naruto spun on one foot to throw a direct punch at Hinata's face, immediately followed by an upward kick. His movements had become predictable to Hinata. He had lost the advantage when he discarded the long metal pole he had previously used as a spear. With admirable skill, Hinata deflected the punch with an open palm, redirecting the force to the side. Then, with a fluid motion, she blocked the kick with her forearm, using the gentle fist technique to cushion the impact. "You keep aiming for my hands, don't you?" Hinata observed calmly, her voice a stark contrast to Naruto's fury, as she leaped to evade another sweeping kick. She seized the brief moment when Naruto was off balance to advance. With a swift motion, she attempted an open palm strike toward Naruto's abdomen, targeting one of his vital chakra points. "You're slow, Hyuga." "Too slow," Naruto retorted, intercepting Hinata's hand with his own, his fingers gripping tightly. His red eyes burned with an intensity that promised pain. Naruto's fingers closed around Hinata's wrist with brutal strength, her bones creaking under the pressure. The cursed seal markings on Naruto's arm pulsed with a violet light. He tightened his grip further, attempting to break her wrist. Hinata felt a sharp sting of pain, but her expression remained impassive. Her Byakugan scanned Naruto's arm, searching for pressure points. The irregularities in the chakra flow caused by the seal's influence made it difficult to pinpoint the pressure points. "It's not that easy, no? This is gentle fist," Hinata replied calmly, her voice barely a whisper amidst the stadium's roar. With her free hand, Hinata delivered a quick strike to Naruto's elbow, trying to free herself from his grip. Naruto intercepted it with his free hand, blocking the attack with a swift and primal movement. His smile widened, revealing his teeth. Naruto pulled on Hinata's wrist to unbalance her, attempting to drive his knee into her abdomen. Hinata, with an agile hip movement, turned her body, allowing Naruto's knee to pass by. Despite the persistent pain in her wrist, she maintained her composure. Hinata's pearl-like eyes focused on Naruto's face, noticing how the tattoos covering his features were receding and his red eyes were fading. With a twist of her trapped wrist, She attempted a leverage move, seeking to turn Naruto's grip against him. Just as she executed the leverage move, Naruto's brutal strength overwhelmed her. A sharp, piercing pain erupted in her wrist, followed by a sickening crack. Some spectators winced at the sound. Her wrist bent at an unnatural angle, and for a moment, Hinata's vision blurred from the pain. Before she could register the impact, Naruto's head collided with hers. Before she could react, Naruto's face came dangerously close, and a brutal headbutt struck her forehead. The blow disoriented her, a sharp ringing filled her ears, and the metallic taste of blood flooded her mouth. Hinata did not scream. She staggered backward as Naruto released her, bringing her good hand to her broken wrist, which now hung at an unnatural angle. "Don't you dare give up, Hyuga," Naruto said dryly, his voice sounding less demonic, tinged with frustration. The black markings on his face were contracting and fading faster, revealing the normal skin beneath. His eyes, though still tinged with red, blinked as they began to return to their original blue. With his Byakugan activated, he observed the dark purple chakra gradually fading from Naruto's chakra network, replaced by a vibrant blue chakra that slowly repaired the damage caused by the malevolent energy. He also noticed several strands of chakra, resembling chains, wrapping around the source of the dark chakra, as if trying to contain it. The familiar and vibrant blue chakra began to dominate, although it still mixed with residual purple murkiness. Naruto murmured to himself that he would end this once and for all, clenching his fists as an immense amount of chakra gathered within them. His skin, muscles, and bones strengthened. Although his voice remained deep, it lost the resonance of madness, and his eyes flickered, revealing glimpses of his original blue amidst the persistent red. Chakra is generally invisible to the naked eye unless highly concentrated or released in large amounts, and Naruto was doing the latter. The blue chakra enveloping his fists became so dense that it became visible, vibrating the air around him and emitting an audible hum. He opened his left fist and placed it over his right, transferring the chakra from his left hand to his right. Now, his right fist appeared like a blinding blue flame. With his right fist blazing like a blue star, Naruto took a deep breath and charged toward Hinata. The air crackled around him, and the hum of concentrated chakra turned into a deafening roar. Despite the pain from her broken wrist and the sharp ache in her forehead, Hinata raised her uninjured arm, attempting one last defense with gentle fist. Naruto's figure, wrapped in a blur of blue and orange, rushed toward her with overwhelming speed, an unstoppable blue blaze bearing down on her. Hinata stood resolute, her expression one of fierce determination, as Naruto's fist approached like a meteor. The impending impact filled the air with tension, and the entire audience seemed to hold their breath. Hinata was unable to block the blow. Naruto's fist struck her squarely in the chest. An invisible shockwave expanded, and Hinata felt as though an entire mountain had hit her. Her feet slid across the ground, dragging several meters back before she fell onto her back with a thud, kicking up a small cloud of dust around her. Air escaped her lungs in a muffled gasp. Her vision blurred for a moment, and the sharp pain in her chest added to the already unbearable agony of her broken wrist and the throbbing in her forehead. Barely conscious, her Byakugan slowly deactivated. The intense blue chakra surrounding Naruto's fist dissipated. He breathed heavily, closing his eyes for a moment as his shoulders rose and fell with each breath. The cursed seal gradually receded, disappearing completely from his body. Then he opened his eyes, revealing their vibrant blue. Silence enveloped the arena, broken only by Naruto's labored breathing. His eyes, now a bright blue, scanned Hinata's nearly motionless form lying on the ground. The tension of the battle slowly dissolved, leaving an atmosphere charged with the raw energy released by the cursed seal. Hinata, staring at the ceiling of the stadium, felt the sharp pain in her chest and wrist, realizing she had lost to someone she considered insignificant. The Rookie of the Year had been defeated by the last in the class. It felt like a nightmare. She was a Hyuga, an elite ninja. The examiner, Hey Gecko, announced Naruto as the winner, breaking the silence. His gaze fell on Hinata as a medical team rushed to her side, ready to provide assistance. Naruto, still catching his breath, looked at Hinata. A fleeting expression of concern crossed his face before it vanished upon seeing the look of hatred in Hinata's eyes. Two medical ninjas in white uniforms knelt beside her, one examining her wrist while the other checked her chest. One of them gently asked if she was okay and if she could move her fingers. Hinata gritted her teeth, the pain radiating with every slight movement, but she shook her head, her gaze still fixed on Naruto, who stood a few meters away. The humiliation mixed with frustration in her eyes, a bitter combination that burned in her throat. She hissed at the medical ninja to leave her alone, trying to push their hand away from her wrist, but the pain stopped her. She didn't want their help, not now. The weight of her defeat felt heavier than her physical injuries. Naruto observed the scene, still breathless from the exertion. He took a step closer, then another, until he was just a few steps away from the fallen Hyuga. He remarked that the taste of Kazumi's lips wasn't anything special. Hinata was filled with rage at his words and attempted to rise from the ground, but she could barely lean forward. She wanted to teach him a lesson for speaking about her girlfriend in such a manner. The medical ninjas, noticing Hinata's attempt to get up, held her firmly to prevent her from worsening her injuries. But Hinata struggled, her face contorted with anger and pain, her eyes burning with pure fury. She shouted at Naruto to shut up, her voice hoarse and strained, each word a struggle. Her body trembled with the frustration of her helplessness, the humiliation searing her soul. She tried to push herself up with her good arm, but a sharp pain in her chest forced her back down. Naruto, unfazed, continued to taunt her, claiming that Kazumi's lips were like tasteless bread, insipid and lacking anything special. He recounted the day of their ninja academy graduation when he and Kazumi had accidentally kissed. A question had been gnawing at Shino from within, and he finally asked Kurenai if she knew what the spiral marks covering Naruto's body were. Kurenai had anticipated the question, knowing her most reserved student well. She debated whether to tell him or not, but observing the bigger picture, she understood that there was a possibility one of her remaining two students might advance and face Naruto. Honestly, she was more concerned about Kiba than Shino. Eventually, both would discover the truth about the cursed seal. Dio let out a long sigh before speaking, glancing sideways at the combat arena, which was being repaired. He noticed Asuma, the Jonin sensei of Team 10, talking with his students. Straining his ears, he caught Shikamaru Nara murmuring about a troublesome blonde. If Asuma had already informed them about the seal, she would do the same with her students. The marks covering Naruto's body were the cursed seal, created by the traitorous Sannin Orochimaru, she explained seriously. Shino immediately understood who his teacher was referring to, while Kiba took a moment longer to recognize the name of the traitorous Sannin. They had discussed him in modern history classes at the academy, Shino replied. Kiba nodded in agreement with his teammate. Kurenai smiled slightly, at least she wouldn't have to explain who Orochimaru was. Orochimaru had created the seal before they were born, using numerous innocent civilians and ninjas in his experiments, and from those cruel experiments, the cursed seal was born. The cursed seal granted its bearer a vast amount of dark chakra and enhanced their physical abilities, but in return, it caused pain, mutations, and corrupted the mind and personality, Kurenai explained, looking at her two students. Shino understood now. The cold cruelty and brutality Naruto had displayed in the Forest of Death were due to the seal, which was altering his psyche. While he reached a rational and detached conclusion, Kiba reacted emotionally. That was why that guy had been acting so strangely, and because of that seal, Hinata had lost, Kiba exclaimed, his face flushed with anger. He had sensed something was wrong with Naruto during the exam in the forest. He had been too cold, too brutal. That wasn't the Naruto he knew, Shino added. Calm down, Kiba. It's not Naruto's fault, Kurenai said. The only one to blame here is Orochimaru. I guess you're right, Kiba murmured, his anger slowly fading. But still, it's not fair. Hinata worked so hard and lost because of that stupid seal. He clenched his fist, frustration evident in his voice. Kurenai nodded, understanding Kiba's frustration. You're right, Kiba. It's not fair to either Hinata or Naruto. But life isn't always fair. She placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Hinata gave it her all, and that's what matters. Her strength and determination are admirable." Shino remained silent, his analytical mind already working on possible solutions and strategies in case he faced Naruto in the final stage. "Kurenai-sensei, how is that seal applied?" Shino asked. "It's applied through a bite from Orochimaru," Kurenai replied. "Wait, that means Orochimaru is in Konoha?" Shino thought, alarmed. The preliminaries had concluded. She won her match against the ninja from the village of Grass. Saku faced Shino and lost pathetically. She was embarrassed that he was her teammate. It hurt her so much that she rejected him. But that was her problem, not his. Shikamaru, the lazy one, won his match. The Kunoichi from the sand also emerged victorious, and the red-haired Garan nearly defeated Rock Lee. Her boyfriend's cousin won his confrontation, while Choji was defeated by Temari. Ino, on the other hand, lost against the last ninja from the sand. The matches were decided at that moment. Naruto Uzumaki vs Temari. Shikamaru Nara vs Kankuro. Kazumi Uchiha vs Niji Hyuga. Shino Aburame vs Gaara. Thus, the fights for the final stage of the Chunin exams were set to take place in a month. Now she was walking toward the infirmary to see her boyfriend, reflecting on everything that had happened in recent days. The first fight had been one of the most lively and interesting. Naruto Uzumaki against Hinata Hyuga. Honestly, she had expected her boyfriend to win easily. She hadn't anticipated that Naruto would cover himself with strange spiral tattoos at the start of the match and unleash an absurd amount of dark chakra. When her sensei looked at her and asked what had happened in the Forest of Death, she could barely respond. She recounted everything, omitting several insignificant details: what happened in that cursed forest, how Naruto used the substitution jutsu to get them away from a strange ninja who turned out not to be human, and how that fool had used himself as bait to draw the ninja from the grass away. She described how they had separated for a night, how they reunited the next day, and other details until they finally reached the tower. Setting that aside, what truly worried her was seeing her boyfriend being ruthlessly attacked by Naruto. But she was also worried about Naruto. That wild, almost beastly behavior made him seem like a crazed individual with red eyes. She wondered why the judge hadn't intervened in the fight. She received her answer when she saw a ninja approaching the referee just as he was about to stop the match. He whispered something in the judge's ear, and after a slight nod, the referee allowed the confrontation to continue. She didn't close her eyes when her teammate broke her boyfriend's wrist with a sharp crack. As soon as the fight ended, she waited for him to be taken out of the arena so she could see how he was doing. Before his match began, her boyfriend had been angry. He averted his gaze every time she spoke, avoiding eye contact. They didn't talk much. She wanted to give him a quick kiss on the lips, but he pulled away. That hurt more than she wanted to admit. But somehow, she felt that her boyfriend's strange behavior was connected to Naruto. When Naruto approached Hinata, who was still lying on the ground while being attended to by the medical team, he said something that made her boyfriend furious. It probably had to do with her. She wondered what it could have been. The only way to find out was to ask Hinata or Naruto. From the other end of the hallway, her teacher was walking toward her, looking thoughtful. "Kakashi-sensei," she said, pulling her teacher from his contemplative state. He barely noticed her and gave a brief greeting. "Kazumi-chan, it's good to see you." "Same here, sis." "Are you going to see Naruto?" Kazumi raised an eyebrow at the question. No, she was going to see her boyfriend. "Not that idiot Naruto." "I'm not going for Naruto, I'm going for my Hinata," she replied honestly. "But what about your match?" Kakashi asked. "Sensei, the preliminaries have already ended, and I won my fight," she responded, looking at her teacher. "So the preliminaries are over," Kakashi murmured. "Then who does Naruto have to fight?" "Against the Kunoichi from the sand." "Hinata isn't in the infirmary, she was transferred to the hospital." Kazumi took a few seconds to process the information. The injury to Kazumi's wrist was more serious than she had imagined. It was better to leave now. She had nothing to do in the infirmary. Kakashi suggested that she could go to the infirmary with Naruto and wait with him while he went to find Sakura so they could all leave together. Kazumi nodded in agreement, and Kakashi smiled slightly behind his mask before heading off to find Sakura. Kazumi resumed her path toward the infirmary. Naruto confronted the Nine Tails, demanding to know why his chakra had been blocked. The beast growled in response, clearly annoyed. The Nine Tails expressed a wish to have been the one responsible for it, anticipating Naruto's disbelief. However, Naruto surprised the beast by stating that he believed it. The Nine Tails roared in frustration, not understanding why Naruto would trust him. Naruto remained calm, sitting in the water and looking directly into the beast's crimson eyes. He clarified that he was being courteous, not kind. The Nine Tails grumbled, reluctant to share information but wanting to see Naruto free. He revealed that an external force had blocked Naruto's chakra and reinforced the seal preventing him from using it. When asked if he knew who was responsible, the Nine Tails replied that it didn't matter and expressed a strange satisfaction that Naruto couldn't access his chakra. Naruto had many questions, but before he could voice them, he was expelled from his own mind. Upon opening his eyes, he found himself staring at the white ceiling of the infirmary. Frustrated, he tried to rise from the bed but quickly realized it was a bad idea. His body ached, and one of his arms felt strangely heavy. Turning to his right, he blushed deeply as he noticed that the strange girl from the previous night was using his arm as a pillow. Last night, she had been awake and dressed, but now she lay beside him in only black underwear. Naruto felt a mix of embarrassment and confusion. He wondered why she was there and what she had seen during the preliminaries. When she finally spoke, it was to express her anger, not at him but at the girl who had stolen his first kiss, claiming it was her right as his future wife. Naruto was taken aback by her jealousy but couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. He reminded himself to focus, but a voice in his head echoed that he had won something precious. The girl expressed her sadness, revealing that she had always wanted to be the first to kiss him. Hearing the sorrow in her voice tugged at Naruto's heart. As he looked into her eyes, he noticed tears threatening to spill. Compelled by an instinctive urge, he gently caressed her cheek. She murmured that a part of him was still asleep and expressed her longing for him to awaken. The moment was tender, filled with unspoken emotions. As the headache that had plagued him began to fade, the girl leaned in closer, kissing him softly. Naruto surrendered to the moment, dismissing any logical thoughts. The kiss felt intoxicating and he found himself wanting more. Kazumi entered the infirmary quietly, not wanting to disturb Naruto. She was upset with him for injuring her boyfriend and was unsure of what he had said to cause the rift between them. As she searched for Naruto, she was unprepared for the sight that greeted her. Her teammate was in bed, sharing a gentle kiss with a dark-haired girl dressed only in underwear. Kazumi rubbed her eyes, convinced she must be dreaming. It couldn't be real. She attempted to dispel the illusion with her chakra, but nothing happened. Just as she was about to try again, Naruto and the girl pulled away from each other, both with their eyes closed. Kazumi raised an eyebrow at Naruto's question about whose lips tasted better, his or the girl's who had stolen his first kiss. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. It was Naruto who had kissed the girl, and he should consider himself lucky to have shared that moment with her. Because, to be honest, Naruto could have spent his entire life without kissing anyone. However, after what he had just witnessed, it seemed he was wrong in his conclusion. The fool would not spend his life without experiencing a kiss. He felt foolish, but that no longer mattered. He eagerly awaited Naruto's response. Clearly, the fool would choose her for his first kiss. After all, Hinata had said that his lips tasted like chocolate, and there was nothing sweeter than chocolate except for her. But the words that came next from Naruto struck her hard. He mentioned that the taste of Kazumi's lips was nothing special, but hers were heavenly. He expressed that they were like a drag he would gladly become addicted to. According to a popular saying, every wise man fears three things: the storm at sea, the moonless night, and the wrath of a kind man. However, it seemed that Katsu and Shirogiri had never heard this saying, especially the last part. Now, they were about to experience it firsthand from Naruto, who was furious and ready to make them pay for what they intended to do to Karen. Naruto Uzumaki was known for being a kind and gentle person, always trying to see the good in life. He was born in Konoha, one of the 5 great ninja villages. On October, he had always longed to become the leader of his village one day, not only to gain the respect and acceptance of his peers but also to leave his mark on history. Having been despised and marginalized since childhood, he had a strong desire to prove his worth and surpass the low expectations of those who had once underestimated him. Never before had Naruto experienced such intense anger. This rage far surpassed what he felt that one time in the Land of Waves. Now, his fury was amplified, and he could hardly contain it. He wanted to confront Katsu and Shirogiri once and for all, to make them feel the fear and anguish that Karen was enduring. He struggled to free himself from the bindings that held him captive, his anger growing exponentially as he saw Karen in distress. Katsu, mocking him, taunted that he was tied up and should just enjoy the show. This only fueled Naruto's rage further. Something inside him ignited, and he resolved not to allow this injustice to unfold before his eyes. With a deafening shout, he broke free from his restraints. He demanded that they let her go, his voice echoing throughout the area as a cursed seal began to cover his body, signaling the depth of his fury. He warned them in a grave and threatening tone that he would not allow them to harm her. As the two genin turned to face him, Naruto's furious expression contrasted sharply with the cursed seal enveloping him and the golden chains emerging from his body, resembling serpents poised to strike at their enemies.